Hey everybody, welcome to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox and I'm here once again, as I've been every single day, Monday through Friday, since March 15th on the airwaves, and one way or the other, we're on the Young Turks, we're now on WJFF in the heart of Catskills, and we want you to share this program far and wide. If you care about the Green New Deal, if you care about the environment, if you care about climate change, if you care about stopping fracking, if you care about a better world, please just share the program. Because frankly, there isn't another program like this one about climate change and culture, and about the solutions, and about our movement, and about every day how in America we really need to process what's happening in front of us from the standpoint of the environment, from the standpoint of the climate, from the standpoint of justice, which is really what the Green New Deal is about. My guest today is Marianne Williamson, and we always have an incredible conversation, Marianne and I. There is just something astounding about the way she's able to formulate both political and spiritual and emotional thinking at the same time. So I'm really looking forward to talking with her for the third time in the history of this program, in the 6 months of this program. So let's say she's a bi-monthly guest. But I really wanted to talk from the standpoint of a person who's been all over the world studying the effects of climate change. And I'm talking about from the glaciers of Iceland to the savannas and forests of Africa, to the smog-filled streets of Beijing, to the islands of Vanuatu and Samoa and Fiji that are threatened to go under the water, a lot of those South Pacific islands, to the Amazon, and all across the United States. But I have to say that the fire season that we're seeing on the West Coast right now, it's a mind-boggling thing. I visited Paradise, California, right after the fire, and I met with a family there. We did a segment for my upcoming film, and it was just devastating to see this. And these were people who had three children, an infant and two young boys, infant girl and two young boys, and two dogs and a cat, and literally running for their lives from the flames. And I've spoken with firefighters out in Colorado who fought the High Park fire, at that point one of the hottest and biggest fires in history. And this now seems like a small fire in comparison to what we're seeing now. This was only just a few years ago. The High Park fire torched huge amounts of the forest around Fort Collins in Colorado. And they were saying that the fire was traveling at 35 miles an hour. The trees were literally exploding in front of the firemen. But take a look at just some of these things that we've compiled from the last few weeks of the fires, and look at the color of the skies. Just take a look at this for a second.
You can see the red hue, the red-orange glow in the sky. There's ash.
One person remarked that the sky is now the color of Donald Trump's skin. And I'm not willing to give Donald Trump 4 more years out of the 10 that we have left to solve the climate crisis. The climate crisis is solvable. We have a plan. It's called the Green New Deal. We talk about it every single day on this program. We probably don't talk about it enough. We've been talking and talking and talking, but we still don't talk about it enough. All the major tenets of the Green New Deal: renewable energy, justice for frontline communities, putting the fossil fuel industry to account and holding their executives responsible, and stopping their corporate greed, ending the military protection of fossil fuel pipelines and other fossil fuel infrastructure that costs us trillions of dollars every year. The Green New Deal is a plan that exists. And if we implemented it, we would stop the madness. We would stop the advance of the madness. Now, we would be in a situation like we are now. We would still have raging hurricanes. We would still have out-of-control wildfires. But we wouldn't be in nearly the bad situation. I mean, if you can imagine this happening 10 times worse, that's what's at stake here. That's the legacy, that's the future. And the way Bob Howarth explained it to me, Robert Howarth, the great professor at Cornell University, the climate is like a bowl. And here's like 1 degree negative, and here's 1 degree, a half a degree. And the climate would sort of move back and forth. And some days, some summers it would be hotter, and some winters it would be colder. And it basically was in a sort of stable regime. That's called the Holocene. The Holocene is 10,000 years that underwrote the rise of civilization, that beautiful period of climactic stability. Now, when you go up over a tipping point, you're over in some other bowl over here, some other universe. We don't know how that operates. We don't know how that works. You're in a whole new place. And you can't just like start cutting fossil fuel emissions then and sort of go back over to here, because those systems And that equilibrium has been destroyed, right? In this bowl, there may be no trees. In this bowl, there may be no phytoplankton. In this bowl, there may be no oxygen on the surface of the earth. So it's not as if you can just go like, oh, you know what? Let's move back over there. You can't do that. That's the extinction event. That's what we're looking at. And all for the greed of a few very small-minded people. It's very, very scary. But our political system is failing. Our political system, which is like our collective intellect, is failing to deal with this problem. Now, I know that Joe Biden has proposed a $2 trillion investment in green infrastructure, a $2 trillion basically climate plan that they came up with between him and Bernie Sanders and the Sunrise Movement and AOC and others. Now, it's not enough, but man, it would be a good start. And it's our job as a movement to then push to the next level. And that's what we're going to talk about today on the program with a great thinker, a great mind, a great spiritual and political mind, a great person, Marianne Williamson. But listen, folks, this is dire, dire, dire circumstances. We have no time to waste. We have 10 years to overhaul every single system on Earth. We got to try to do it. Marianne, I think you and I have a psychic link because I looked at the schedule today and saw that you were coming on. I said, man, boy, do I need to talk to Marianne Williamson today because it is a rough day. It's just a rough week. It's a rough, there's 2020 jokes abound, but something about this moment feels like the precipice between teetering into cynicism and potentially getting back on the road towards a better future. And what I'm saying about this is because we have these incredible fire season that's breaking loose, and we see these red skies. Somebody remarked, Trump-colored skin skies, orange. And I see a lot of folks within the left breaking away, saying, "Stay home, don't vote for Joe Biden. It's not worth it." There's this. Maybe this is what I get on Twitter a lot because I'm a person that gets attacked by the fossil fuel industry, and a lot of these are funded accounts or bots or whatever. But the amount of rancor that's happening. What do you see right now as this moment, and how do we need to go forward? I mean, I really treasure your remarks in our last conversation because they were so hopeful. But this does feel to me like a precipice moment, 6 weeks out or something from the election.
Unfortunately, I feel exactly as you do, and for the exact same reasons, including the idea that all of these people claiming to be more sophisticated than we are about the realities of the duopoly, claiming that somehow they are the more politically transcendent by suggesting that we stay home and allow an obvious fascist dictator to have a second term is beyond. And that coupled, as you were saying, it's such a multidimensional breakdown. The fires in California alone, you know, I think of California much like the Egyptian pyramids. The Egyptian pyramids don't just belong to the Egyptians, they belong to the world. The land of California. Every day you see something worse in terms of how the Trump administration has so corrupted the mission of agency after agency. And yet, even that is compounded with the fact that no matter how much news we get along that line every single day, there are obviously so many people who apparently don't care. Right. Or Murdoch making his money off distracting us on Fox or whatever. So
a lot of the times the reporting isn't even saying climate change with related to the fires and things like this. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just think, you know, people don't care, but they're also not being informed.
Well, in terms of what I just said, people not caring, I wasn't even speaking specifically to the fires in California or to climate change. I was talking about the fact that the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice, agency after agency in the United States that are supposed to be independent, at least to a great extent, of political pressure, now used by an obviously crime family. The Trump family is a crime family. It's like, I don't know, have you ever watched The Sopranos and you don't know what's going on here? And, like you said, how many people are saying, well, you know, and that's what they said about Hitler too. Many people on the saying, just
Well,
let
that's the truly terrifying thing for me, and maybe I'm vibing so much on this sort of intergenerational trauma front. But I have to say, you're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. We'll be right back. You're tuned into Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. My guest is Marianne Williamson. Very fortunate to have Marianne Williamson on with us today. Marianne, I'm grandson of Holocaust survivors, so to me, the Hitler analogy, it really, really resonates. And I feel as if there are a lot of people saying, well, what if we have to flee the country? And we can't get out at this point. No country will accept us. It seems like history replaying itself. How do we double down against cynicism at this moment? Because I think so much of this is driven by cynicism, driven by exhaustion, driven by this collapse of idealism as well.
cynicism is just an excuse for not helping.
Mm.
That's all the cynicism is. You know, I see people sometimes when you talk about the Hitler analogy, they say that shows disrespect to victims of the Holocaust. Quite the opposite. It shows disrespect to victims of the Holocaust not to point out how much of what is going on is straight out of the Mussolini and Hitler playbook.
I would agree.
I do think that we have to stay away from being overwhelmed by the ain't it awful. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that it's genuinely awful. I think we have to acknowledge it's awful. We have to cry. We have to grieve. We have to scream it into a pillow and allow ourselves the realization there are a lot of hours in the day. And you also have to get up and you have to save your country. And I believe that there is enough metaphysical construct that will give us hope, or at least gives me hope. And that has to do with the fact that nature itself is self-correcting. You know, the human body is miraculous in its ability for cell after cell, to follow a natural intelligence. And that natural intelligence with which every cell is imbued leads every cell to collaborate with other cells in the healthy functioning of the organ and the organism of which they are part. But the body is also imbued with an immune system, which means that the body can take quite a lot of assault and injury and still repair itself. The same is true of the psyche. The brain, the psyche can take a lot of heartbreak and agony and still repair. And so is civilization. So I think of every citizen as a cell in the immune system in the body politic. We have had a compromised immune system, and climate change is a perfect example of this. What is happening now in every single area, nothing is new here. We have had plenty of time to deal with these things, and we had a compromised immune system. One of the reasons our civilization had a compromised immune system was because whereas in the body, the divine intelligence, the natural intelligence, by whatever words you want to use, of the body's cells, is that the highest actualization of the cell is that it collaborates with other cells for the healthy functioning of the whole. Every once in a while, for reasons that scientists do in part understand and in other parts do not understand, a cell disconnects from its natural intelligence, goes off and does its own thing. That's malignancy, that's cancer. It's not only malignancy in the body, it's also malignancy in consciousness, and that is what has happened to the human race. We have been infected by a malignant consciousness, and that consciousness is the thought, it's all about me. That's what a cancer cell is. I don't want to contribute to the healthy functioning of the pancreas or the lungs. I want to do my own thing. That's a malignant thought. It's a malignant consciousness. Now, what happens there? In the United States, our characterological upside, we like the fact that we are rugged individualists, but when America works correctly, we have rugged individualism and individual productivity and creativity that is balanced with a concern for the common good. But because of the overtly unfettered capitalist and consumer-based mentality, as we all know, we have moved from rugged individualism to rugged narcissism. And that is destroying, that is a cancer on our body politic. What is the good news? The good news is I do think, much like in the physical body, the immune system is activated. And that's what all of us are who are awake to the danger to the system. You know, I remember once, Josh, I hurt my hands. I was jogging and I stupidly was running on this cement where, you know, there were these huge trees. And so the roots were pushing up the
The sidewalk,
last
yeah.
place where you should be running. So obviously I tripped, my hands went out in front of me instinctively to protect myself, and I had these huge gashes on my hand. And it was so interesting because I was up close and personal, since it was on my hands, every single day, watching the healing of my hand. And a friend of mine who's a doctor said something very interesting to me very early on. He said, look how red your hands are. That means the red blood cells are rushing to the wound. It's a good thing that your hands are bright red. The red blood cells are rushing in. So now the red blood cells are rushing in. And just like the cells in the body receive a natural intelligence so that they're assigned where to go, I think all of us have a natural intelligence that is assigning us where to go. Now, in spiritual terms, some people see this in religious terms, some people see it in secular terms. But the idea is that the universe, whether you see this spiritually or not, is basically self-correcting. The universe is a kind of GPS. If we take a wrong turn, and God knows America has taken some really wrong turns, the alternative, the path back to harmony is available. And each and every one of us are downloading, even now. And you download it not through your mortal, rational mind alone. This is why we need holistic work. This is why people who pray, people who meditate, people who reflect, people who are thinking deeply, we're all receiving information, as it were, that is beyond what the mortal mind can do. When you look at things like the Oath Keepers, you look at things like the Proud Boys, you look at things like what the Trump family is doing to this country, you look at things like the climate change horrors that are already upon us. Anybody who is deluding themselves that surely we can just come up with a plan to fix this, I'm sorry. But if you allow yourself a more expansive, holistic view of what's possible, then you realize that all of us are being filled with something right now. And another aspect to that I love is the idea that just as cells in the body collaborate with other cells, there's a line in the Course in Miracles, Josh, where it says, at a certain point, you will not go forward alone, for you will be joined by mighty companions. That's you and me in this instance. That's you and all your guests. That's everybody who's being led to circumstances and relationships. So it's happening. It's not quick. In all the religious traditions, you have 40 years between slavery in Egypt and the Israelites landing in the Promised Land. You have 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. And that time element is a symbol for the time it takes between the condition of destruction and the condition of rebirth. And that's where we are right now. We are in time. But all the religious traditions tell us we're going to get there.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot because of our last conversation. I think I mentioned the fact that I'm in the middle of making a film, right? All the days that I am not working on staying home, which is just a couple of days a week, I'm out there in the wilderness in a one-room cabin, sort of recreating Henry David Thoreau with one little solar panel and 3 little solar lights and the radio. And I've been going through COVID for the last 5 months doing this. And what's been fascinating to me is just this observing nature, which you're talking about nature correcting itself. And I am watching something else happen that I think that is challenging to the theory that it corrects itself. I think it corrects itself with us involved, because I'm looking at a battle. We're part of that nature. We're not separate from nature. We think of ourselves as separate from nature, but we're not. We are a part of nature. Just because we have cell phones and we have houses and we have shoes and we have eyeglasses, we're not separate from the tree and the bear and the beaver and the ant. What I'm seeing out in nature, and you might find this fascinating, is invasive species. Invasive species like honeysuckle, like Japanese stiltgrass, like all sorts of different invasive species that came here with colonialism. And literally that battle between the indigenous and native species, the native plants, and the invasive species is happening in nature every single day. And what we have to do, and to a degree, is make sure that colonial monocrop does not destroy the indigenous biodiversity, which is out there, because it threatens to do so. And there's a metaphor there. When you see these invasive, like bushes, they're like thorn bushes, right? And they just take over whole fields, huge amounts of fields. And the only thing you can do is pass through them, because you can never get rid of them unless you burn them, which is what the natives did. But we can't do that now. We can't set fire to the fields because we would be charged with arson or whatever. But the truth is that there is a battle going on in nature, actually, between that moment of colonialism in 1492 and the present moment, and it's still playing itself out. We used to have 400 million beavers in this country. Now we have 12 million because Europeans like to make them for hats. So, or they did at the time. And the beavers channel where the water goes, and the water creates the entire continent that we see. So we are at a fundamental imbalance. And my worry is that we're at a tipping point that we go too far. And then the next balance is, a great mass extinction event, and we all go, and then the planet generates a form of intelligence that's better than us. But what's fascinating to me right now is that the pandemic, or the epidemic in 1492, when Columbus and all the pilgrims came to this country, that is actually what killed about 90% of the indigenous population. Epidemics and pandemics change everything. We're at that moment now of a pandemic. We're at that moment now of a fundamental tipping point in the climate, and also of our political consciousness, our political system in America. You're tuned into Staying Home. I'm Josh Fox. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Marianne Williamson. So, do you see forces lining up? The 500-year swath of history of Europeans coming to the American continent, white supremacy in the form of Donald Trump, white supremacy in the form of Manifest Destiny, a pandemic happening. I see this as such a crucial incubator. What are some of the lessons now, 6 months into the pandemic, that you see with respect to all of these strands that I'm bringing up? I know it's a complicated question, but
we are definitely experiencing our karma. There is no doubt about that. Every action has a reaction. But I think it's important to remember Buddha was born about 500 years before Jesus. And Buddha's message to the world was action, reaction, action, reaction. And the message of Jesus was, yes, but in a moment of grace, the karma is burned. And I believe that there is such a power of consciousness, whether you see it in religious terms or non-religious terms, that has to do with owning what we know, whether it has to do with Catholics going to confession, whether it has to do with Jews on Yom Kippur or the Day of Atonement, or whether it has to do with people in AA, a 12-step meeting, having to admit the exact nature of their wrong. I think it's like in ancient times when they would say repent, to rethink. I do believe that as enough of us, and I think there are enough of us now, really understand much of what you're saying, understand many of the mistakes of our history, are willing to atone for them, and are willing to make amends for them, that we can turn this thing around. In the Talmud, there is a saying that you are not obligated to complete the task, but neither are you permitted to abandon it. Optimism is a moral imperative. And that goes back to what you were talking about, people saying they're not going to vote for the duopoly, as though there's some higher transcendent good in just throwing up our hands and allowing the fires of various sorts to rage. When I was younger and I was first beginning to study comparative religion and philosophy and all of those things, I remember when I first read about Buddhism, and I would read about the fact that there was such a concentration on whether or not you died happy. Now, maybe because I was young at the time and my death seemed so far away, I didn't understand, why does it matter that much whether or not you die happy? But I've come to understand the point there. It's whether or not you die knowing you did what you could while you were here. Our ancestors did not owe us anything, Josh. And I'm not someone who thinks that our ancestors did everything wrong. And I also am not one of those people who think we're so much smarter than they were. I mean, we can talk about all the problems in our history, but we can identify with the problem solvers. We had slavery, but we also had abolition. We had institutionalized suppression of women. We also had the suffragettes. We had segregation. We also had the civil rights movement. So I think we have to avoid whining. We have to avoid being overwhelmed by the ain't it awful. And if there's a fire, pick up a bucket of water and do what you can.
The overwhelmed feeling is a huge one. I know a lot of the youth activists that I've had on this program have been motivated by that sense of being overwhelmed, by that sense of panic, that they own the future in the same way that maybe adults own their house or own the backyard or something like that, that they don't want to see destroyed. And there's this palpable sense of dread and this palpable sense of fear. But you see that when they come together in an organization, a youth organization, or Fridays for Future or something, that dread and isolation is broken. Where are the coming togethers that you see right now?
Everywhere, just as you do. It's all these protests. It's the climate protests. It's the BLM protests. I mean, it's everywhere. It's all the Zoom calls that everybody's on every single day. The only thing that disturbs me is that there's not enough coming together in terms of electoral politics, although I certainly understand. It's not like I don't understand where the cynicism comes from. I was up close and personal with the corruption of that system, and I know it. I just don't feel that any of us have the right to therefore deny the future any opportunity for healing. You know, it is an aspect of life. You see it in an insect in your bathtub. It is an aspect of all life to seek to preserve itself. And so the youth of this generation have what every youthful generation has. It's a will to live. It is an audacity and an individuation that comes from that eternal will to live. Now, what's interesting to me about age is that you would think that as people got older, you would have what many people, I think my age, are tempted to, which is, okay, well, it's probably not going to get that horrible before I'm out of here, although less and less these days. But it's counterintuitive. It doesn't work that way. You actually get more radical as you get older. And the sense, oddly enough, the sense of urgency, at least as I experience it, and I know many people that I know experience it, actually increases. And I believe, and look, this is just statistical too, Josh. If you look at the polls in America, we're not stupid people. The poll after poll after poll shows we're basically a little left of center. The polls show we want Medicare for all. The polls show we would have wanted righteous and responsible climate action. The polls show an openness to new regenerative ideas such as Green New Deal. The problem is that our political system has become so corrupted that it is not a channel, it is not a conduit for the highest dignity, decency, and intelligence of the American people. That's the political crisis on our hands. And I just hope enough people will show up. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to provide the solutions, but I do believe he's a pause in the action.
Well, there's this problem of,
and will give us
as you mentioned, though, the political system is not up to it. I mean, in the last 20 years, we've had two horribly tyrannical presidents installed by the Electoral College, a system that was created by slave owners and those who approved of slavery and genocide 250 years ago, and we have not yet updated that as a basic problem. And I think that's a wonderful way to put it. I mean, because our political system does not represent our political intelligence unless we completely overwhelm that system and Joe Biden wins by 8 points or whatever it is at this point.
I'd like to speak to that just a little bit. Sometimes, Josh, I feel that people on the right have only talk about what America has done right and have no listening to what we've done wrong. But I believe too many people on the left only talk about what we've done wrong and have no listening for what we've done right. And I believe that it's when we recognize the juxtaposition of both that we gain the insight that we need. For instance, let's say something like the signers of the Declaration of Independence. It is true that 41 of the 56 were slave owners, but not all of them were slave owners. Some of them were adamantly opposed to slave owning. And if you actually look at the history of the United States, leading all the way up to abolition, leading all the way up to the Civil War, these movements, it's not like our ancestors were a bunch of terrible, terrible people. What our ancestors were is what we are, the mix of both. That's what the signing of the Declaration of Independence proves. It embodies our characterological bipolar nature. We were both the signers of the document, which gave the most extraordinarily enlightened foundational principles that had ever been forming the core of a nation, and slave owners, 41 out of the 56. But that struggle between the two, which is reenacted every generation, we're simply going through our iteration of it. But if you look at our history over time, we do tend to self-correct. And I don't think we get where we need to go by just slamming everybody who was ever in the past as though we're the first generation to have any intelligence about what's going on here.
That's not my intention.
No,
I'm
not
just
saying
that the Electoral College specifically as a remnant of the slave states rebelling and saying we need to make sure that we have equal representation, when everybody knew that
Absolutely. Although let's remember, even some of the people who wrote those things, we don't look at them and exalt them for what they lived, but we do have legitimate gratitude for the fact that they left us the ideals encoded, and they themselves said it's going to be up to it's going to be up to every generation to fully embody this. And I think our arrogance towards the past actually blinds us at times to our own responsibility in the present.
It's also a point that we don't know our history. I have to say, you're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. We'll be right back. You're tuned in to Staying Home, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. I'm Josh Fox. My guest is Marianne Williamson. We're talking about the Declaration of Independence, of course. But I think that the knowledge of history is such an important, it's like a depth chart, right? And I think I had Reverend Lennox Yearwood earlier on the program. We were talking about environmentalism and how environmentalism broke off at a certain point from other social movements. And they decided that what they were going to do was like create magazines and go hiking and sell backpacks, and you were a member of the Sierra Club, instead of going out into the streets like the civil rights movement and
electing candidates.
But what I'm doing an inside game, a lobbying game. But my point is that now we're seeing, with this Green New Deal's emphasis on justice and on racial justice being climate justice, we're seeing that those strands of history come back together in a very, very powerful way. And I think knowing that history really, really helps. And my next question for you is about faith, because when I see the depths of the cynicism of the left attacking this idea of don't vote for the duopoly, what I feel most prevalent is this idea that there's no faith in the movement to change it after the election, right? It's all about this big moment. And if we don't get everything we wanted in this one big moment, well, then forget it. We'll see you 4 years from now. And the idea that it is our movement that's the through line. And I know I can push Joe Biden. I have a huge amount of faith in the fact that I can push Joe Biden. I can't push Donald Trump. I know I can't push Donald Trump any more than I could have pushed Mussolini or Hitler or Pol Pot. I can't push Donald Trump. I can push Joe Biden. I have evidence of this fact. I have a story about him being a part of the intervening to save this river basin, the watershed for New York City, right? So but I feel that I have the faith in our movement. I have the faith in ourselves. How do we then bring that back to this moment? Because I do think these voters are crucial voters. They're crucial people in crucial states, right? The Jill Stein margin in Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin and in Michigan was greater than the margin of victory. It was. These people it was a problem. And then the people who didn't vote, the undervote counted in Michigan. I stay up late because I don't think I can influence your local neighborhood white supremacist as much as I could potentially reach out to these people and say, listen, this is about faith in us. What do you think?
Well, getting everything we want is not on the ballot.
No.
We know that. So, and I agree with what you said. I don't even know, actually, you're a little more hopeful than I about, quote unquote, pushing Joe Biden. But I do think we can push the needle if Joe Biden is president. Whether that has to do with pushing him specifically or the formation of another party, I don't know. But one thing we should face is that if you have Trump as president, I think people are not allowing themselves. We need to study two pieces of history. First of all, people need to study American history. We have 11 states in the United States that don't even require half a year of study of American history, civics, and government. If you don't learn as a child what the Bill of Rights is, you don't know as an adult to be horrified when it's under assault. So number one, people need to read up on American history, because the revisionism I read on the left and that I see on social media, the revisionism on the left is every bit as
Give us an
vigilant
example.
and ignorant as revisionism on the right. That's number one. Number two, people need to read up about the history of Germany in the 1930s and 1940s. I agree with you. We will have space for activism if Biden wins. If let me tell you what's going to happen, and I know you know this, but everybody should think about this. What Trump is doing now is Trump when held back. You give him a second term, there will be no holding him back, and they will do things like this. People who have ever Googled Antifa, people who have ever Googled BLM, they will be on lists. And people like Bill Barr and Chad Wolf will talk about how these people need to be rounded up because they are the leaders of a movement to destroy our democracy. We should not kid ourselves. That's how dangerous this is.
Well, I think it's already happening. They're talking about rounding up the leaders of BLM.
Nearly the way it
right,
will
no, of course. But the seeds are, listen, the thing about Hitler was everybody thought that he was not going to do the things that he said he was going to do. And what did they just say they were going to do? Exactly what you just said. They said they're going to round up the leaders of BLM and call them terrorists.
That's right.
They're going to who is, listen, can I just say this also?
When I say this,
one thing.
I'm sorry.
I have been an activist my entire life, right? I've been an activist since a little kid, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't never met an Antifa.
I know.
I have never met an Antifa.
Yeah.
And you would think by now
I
would have met, I think by now I would have met an Antifa. You know? I think I would have. It's like Brazil, that movie, where all the terrorists are blamed for all the bombs, and there are no terrorists. And at the end of the movie, she looks at the hero, and she says, have you ever met an actual terrorist?
There's a huge lie, and it's a distraction from the real terrorist threat, which is the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys and the white supremacists who are actually, we have Republican senators and Republican congressmen who are actually justifying a 17-year-old showing up with an AR-15 to take care of business because they feel that the police are not being allowed to do their job. And the infiltration of American police, we know what's happening here. But we have to stand for what we know. Now, one thing I will say about something you said before, it's not good news, but I think we need to be clear-eyed about this. A lot of people think that the most powerful direct action is to take to the streets and protest. I'm not saying don't take to the streets. I think these protests are important. But we have to face something, Josh. They don't care. BLM is the largest social justice movement in the history of the United States of America, and there has not been one legislative response. There has not been one. That is why we must not leave out electoral politics, not only in terms of the presidential election, but God forbid he wins again. We must have these down ballot races go in a blue direction and hopefully in a progressive direction in order to hold him back to whatever extent we possibly can.
You know, it's interesting, though. You are a person who went through such a smear campaign, as
I did.
And I was on Twitter the other day, and it was the day that Ryan Knight came out and said, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. And it was this 300,000 people on Twitter, you know, were like, you know, thank you. You're so great. And I just wanted to put up a tweet that said, meet the new Jill Stein. And I didn't. And I felt that it was mostly because first of all, I didn't want to take the bait, but also because I felt that I was terrified of what these people were going to do to me next. I already
They're coming after me on social media. I'm an apologist for the duopoly, and I've been neoliberalized. And too bad I sold out to the DNC. I mean,
right, selling out, right? And they say things like, "Well, you made two fracking movies, and now you're pushing a person who is for fracking." And I'm just like, I don't know where these people. I don't think a lot of them are actually people. I think a lot of them are corporate mouthpiece accounts that are being paid to do so, but I don't know the answer. I just am trying to defeat it both psychically, emotionally, spiritually, and politically. In the 3 minutes that we have left, what's the best piece of advice, forward direction that we need to guard our spirit to go forward in this next 6 weeks? Because, like I said, I do think it is a precipice moment, not just in terms of fascism in the United States, but in terms of the climate as well, and that we have no margin of error here. What do you think are?
There's no grace period left.
Yeah, there's no grace period left. So what's our 2 minutes of getting us to this next level of endurance? Because a lot of people are just plumb exhausted too.
Well, at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about how the immune system operates and how cells in the body are assigned. And I think we're all being assigned. I think we need to be very alert right now. I think just as the cells in the body are led by a natural intelligence, I think we are subconsciously led by a natural intelligence. I was attacked when I was 17 years old, rather violently. And when I was attacked, every cell of my body became alive. I had already at that time taken psychedelics, so I knew the experience, but I was not stoned, and every cell of my body, and it really showed me how the body is alert to danger. I think that civilization is alert to danger, and I think we all have an openness and an alertness now. The problem is not that we don't have this direct intelligence. The problem is that the thinking of the world forms a kind of static in the radio. This is where meditation comes in, reflection, quiet, inspiration, prayer, etc. And then face every day knowing that there is a job for each and every one of us. Every Zoom call, every show you're on, every show you produce, every post on your social media, every conversation you have with everyone, every candidate you support, every conversation you get into on social media trying to move the needle. And remember, millions of other people are doing it too. I notice how many of us are awake in the middle of the night. You're not the only one too anxious to sleep, everybody. So are we all. Some of the best conversations are going on at 3 and 4. Nobody can sleep. And that's not all bad either, because that's when those negative ions are out. So it's a battle. It's a contest. There's no doubt about it. And we know how the forces of destruction are on high gear. But I think the forces of rebirth and regeneration are on high gear as well. And faith, knowing that we all have a natural intelligence which, if we allow it to, will guide us through these times. We will navigate these rough waters. And I do believe, Josh, I do believe that ultimately, this country will survive. This country will be better. I don't know if I and people my age will live to see the complete flowering of what's possible. But if we do what we can now, I do think we'll die knowing that we did what we could while we were here.
Williamson, thank you so much. Extremely important words, not only for me today, but resonant over these next 6 weeks. And thank you so much for being back on.
I love you. It's always great to see you.
Love you too.
Thank you for having me on. Bye-bye. You take care.
All right, you too. Well, there you have it. One of the most important political thinkers in America right now, in my view, Marianne Williamson. This has been Staying Home. We'll see you tomorrow.
Can you name the representative of your district?
The representative of my district, oof.
I have no idea.
I actually don't know who the representative of my district is.
Do you know what the corporate tax rate is?
I think it's pretty high. I should know this.
Like in between 20, 25%. I don't know.
How many amendments are in the U.S. Constitution?
Oh no.
This brings me back to grade school.
I should know this because I was a history major, but I do not remember.
I don't know that.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Nope.
I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know? I didn't know. It's time to change that. We live in the best country in the world. We live in the most powerful country in the world. We love our American freedom, but only half of us take part in the political process. Only half of us vote. We don't fulfill our duties as U.S. citizens to make this country a better place. It's time that we use our voices as a team, as a country, to become better. We will stand up. We will be empowered. We will stay educated and informed about politics every single day because it's our responsibility. And Politiscope just made it easy for you. So join me, join us, and let's be Americans.
How in the world are you going to get the right to vote if you don't already have the right to vote? That's impossible. Reason they tell you things are impossible is because they don't want you to try. It only took 7 years for that to get an amendment to get a right to vote.
Does this result in millions upon millions of Americans losing their coverage? And we've been waiting to find out, and now we know, yes, it will cut millions.
Public education was supposed to be the way to equalize everyone regardless of their socioeconomic status. But if you come from a family that's poor, how are you going to afford grade school for your kids?
This fight is about fairness and morality. It's about the American values.
You think that black people all across the country, in every city, were all lying when they said the police abuse us and the police kill us when they should? No, of course they weren't lying. Yes, it does happen. Yes, they do get targeted more.
Why are we going to put immigrants in prison for 5 years, which American taxpayers have to pay for, if we're so concerned with immigrants using up our so-called resources?
We're gonna do both. We're gonna fight Trump and we're gonna fight the establishment. It is not that hard. Yes, you can do both at the same time. Go tell them.
ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com.
Welcome to The Conversation. I'm Benjamin Dixon, host of The Benjamin Dixon Show. Excited to be joined this afternoon by Ravi Patel. He is a filmmaker, humanitarian. He is a documentarian, an entrepreneur, and an actor. You may have seen him in one of my favorite films with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen, The Long Shot. He is in the upcoming Wonder Woman 1984. And he is also the feature and the star of HBO Max's highly anticipated series, Ravi Patel's Pursuit of Happiness. He is joining us today. Ravi, how are you?
Hey, Ben, what's up? Wow, what an intro, man. Feeling good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to talk about your show, the show on HBO Max. I had a chance to see the first 2 episodes, and I'm gonna be honest. When I'm done interviewing you, I've got to go see the next 2 episodes, and I'm saying that not to butter you up or anything like that, but it really digs down into some really critical issues of life, but you deal with them in a way that is not intrusive or uncomfortable. You deal with life, you deal with death, you deal with marriage, you deal with raising kids and the real complex nature of all those things. Like, just tell me what inspired you to take that approach and deal with difficult topics while traveling the world.
Well, first of all, thanks for saying that. That's an incredible compliment, man. Look, I got a chance at making my own show. This thing started at CNN. It was originally supposed to take Bourdain's slot, and then the pandemic hit, and CNN's like, well, we can't do shows. And then thank God, HBO Max wanted it. And so when the conversation started, it was like, hey, we really want a show. The only thing we know for sure is it needs to travel. But other than that, do whatever is authentic to you. Well, I'm not like an expert in anything, but the one thing that I have done before was, I made this documentary with my sister called Meet the Patels, which is about my parents setting me up on all these blind dates. And it was, it did really well. And it was also a really incredible moment in my life in terms of what it taught me. Not just about, it wasn't just introspective and brought me closer to my family, but it also taught me what filmmaking can do in my own life. And so when this opportunity came, I thought, like, well, I'm at this point in life where, I'm 41, which is kind of this interesting point of inference from boy to man, and I'm a new father. I have a 3-year-old daughter. I'm fairly newly married, and I'm really concerned with trying to be a better father, husband, son, while also get the most out of my profession and achieving a lot, while also feeling the panic of mortality and trying to make the most out of my day every day. So really, I was like, okay, free vacation. I'm gonna take everyone in my life and do the thing that I already do, which is, talk about the stuff I was really urgently discussing in therapy.
Yeah, it is like therapy, right? Watching the show is like therapy because like episode 1, and we have some clips that we'll be playing later on, but in episode 1, you deal with, the title is Growing Old in Mexico, and you take your parents down to Mexico, and they really find like a new life that I don't think they expected, and I think you didn't expect. And you phrase it in a way where you didn't want it. When you get to a certain age, you want to be cared about and not necessarily cared for. I would never forget that line. Just talk about that shift and that cycle, because you said one other thing that I would love for you to speak on is that you got to a point now in your relationship with your parents where now they're not just your parents, they're your friends.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thanks for that. I think becoming a father. Are you a father, Ben?
Yes, I am. I'm going to bring that up to him.
Okay. So becoming, I don't know if you had this experience, but becoming a father for me was really eye-opening as a son. It really, the extent to which I'm obsessed with my daughter.
Yeah.
I had this moment where I'm like, oh, my parents are obsessed with me in that way. And all I want with my daughter is for her to love me, to think I'm the best, and to want to be around me. And I hope that we're together forever. And I realized, oh, my parents have probably felt this way about me.
Yeah.
Their entire lives. And we're in this weird time with modernity, and especially when you tie in the American, our obsession with individuality and privacy. we're in this point in time where there's zero dependency on each other. We don't need a ride to the airport. We don't need sugar from the neighbor. We have apps for all these things. Yeah. We don't need each other. And I think our parents are getting screwed in the process because they don't get this thing that they thought they were signing up for, which was at this stage in their life that they were going to be close to us and maybe even in our own home. So becoming a father for me has made me reflect on that in a very big way. And again, it started in therapy. I was talking to my therapist and I was saying, a lot of my friends are starting to lose their parents, and it's made me realize, I've never even been to a funeral, which I realize is insane. And I was asking my therapist, I'm like, is there any way for me to figure out what would be the things that I'd be sitting here asking myself that I wish I'd asked now, that I would potentially be asking after they passed? That was how that started. And so we went to Mexico, which is one of the hottest retirement destinations for expats. And I mean, you saw what happened. It was like this incredibly fun adventure where my parents, were. Another thing that was really revealing, by the way, was that there's more than one phase in retirement. There's this fun phase for the people who go to Mexico. That's this new phase that didn't exist before because now people are living longer. I feel like I just answered 8 questions and I'm not sure I answered the one you asked.
No, it's great. It's great. I liked in what you do in this series so far. I still have to see the remaining parts of the series. Is you seamlessly intertwine politics into it, right? You do talk about the cost of retirement in Mexico versus the opportunities that retirees in the United States don't have, and especially in your second episode, you deal with that a lot. Talk about the subtle politics of your series.
Well, truthfully, I'm not a political person. I am really, I care about people, and my approach to politics is simply a matter of, I first approach politics just as a matter of humanity. Yeah. And so my real touch point, and in fact, it's funny. I was just talking to my dad about this 2 days ago, because I thought I was Republican growing up, and my dad was too. And when I finally started to care about, or I guess pay attention, I realized, I'm not Republican. And I had this conversation with my dad. And it was right before an election, and I told my dad, "Hey, I decided I'm not Republican, and the reason why I decided that is because I think I'm fairly intelligent, yet I really don't understand all these policies and all this stuff about economics and healthcare. I know what they're talking about, but from the little bit of experience in my life, it seems like all that stuff kind of works itself out. The one thing that I feel super confident that I don't need to go to grad school or be in politics to understand is right and wrong as it relates to people. And so when it comes to civil rights, I feel like that's something it's very easy for me to say that, everyone should have equal rights and equal opportunity. And to that extent, I feel like there's at least one crew that isn't prioritizing that. And so I had that conversation with my dad. And what was really interesting about it, by the way, was a few weeks later, my dad calls me up and he had thought about what we had talked about, and he decided to do the same thing, which is really beautiful. So anyway, you asked about in the show how politics takes place. The fact of the matter is, I don't think about politics. I literally just tried my best to be as honest about my own point of view as possible, because really what makes this show, the one thing, like I said earlier, I'm not an expert in anything, but what I am good at is being extremely honest. And I tried in each episode to go on each adventure in earnest.
Yeah. And it was beautiful. One of the things that jumped out was the footage that your parents had of them when they first came to the United States, that you put in there. And this was back in the day. Like there was no, having cameras that you could use on the road, like that was high tech technology, right? Yeah. Do you think that do you think you got your start watching those videos? Did that influence you in a significant way?
You know what I think? Watching that footage, I realized that my dad was insanely talented. Like the cinematography and some of that stuff is incredible. And what I realized having watched that footage, but also being a filmmaker who's made stories about his own life and his family, where I get this rare opportunity to see my parents as characters in a story and craft them from a beginning, middle, and end. I get this rare detachment from them that most people don't get with their loved ones, where I get to see them for who they are and their flaws and their strengths. And one of the things that's revealed itself, I think, in seeing them is that it's like I realize myself, my sister and I are both in entertainment, and what felt like something that was I wouldn't say rebellious, but a new path, an unexpected path. Actually, the apple actually isn't that far from the tree. My parents are complete, like 100% entertainers. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean they're cinema gold, right? I mean, and by the way, they're actors now. I cast them in this show that I wrote, like that is coming out in a couple months. Like they're so in. My dad's Facebook status says actor and celebrity guest speaker.
I love it. But your dad, the chemistry between them on air, I was like, okay, now he got some of that talent directly from them because they had a great chemistry. And they're so funny. They're funny
so
the way
funny,
they're like self-deprecating and they like to poke jabs at each other. It was just great to watch.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning. She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us. We're having fun, it's election night!
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley! Down goes Manafort! Down goes Cohen! Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said, you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says, let's flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it, spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Yeah, still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually gonna show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening?
No.
No, that's just wrong. Every way.
And we'll see you next time.
Hey Dave, as you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
I want us to play a clip from the second episode, Over Parenting in Japan, because this is where I really dialed in, because I have a 2-year-old, and at the time of you filming this, you had a 2-year-old as well, right? And she's 3 now. So let's take a look at this first clip.
Did you know how to do all these things?
あとは Google で調べたりするのと
That's awesome. You don't miss the city at all?
いや、そんなことはないですね。
で隣の人と家が離れてるけどちゃんと毎日会うと挨拶もするし野菜ももらうしいろんな交流があるので
Do you get lonely being a mom out here without a ton of people around?
ありがたいことに私の周りには友達がいてでその気が合う仲間が
That's good.
Who does all the parenting here?
ですね。
Oh, yeah, same.
Same ね。
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Do you know that she's in charge?
もちろんとか言って
Now, I didn't get a chance to tell them specifically what part I wanted to see out of this, but if I did, I would have told them to include the scene on the bridge where you ran from the bee. that was the funniest part because you reacted like my kids when they're on the trampoline and a bee comes within 30 feet of them. They pile on top of each other like I don't know. It is just the most hilarious thing, but it's hilarious and it's so touching that you kind of expose that no matter where we are on this planet, in a lot of ways, we're all living the same type of lives. We all have some of those same transitions where we want to move from the city. And then we get about 40 years old, we really start considering moving out to the country. Talk about that a little.
Yes. Oh, man. Well, you know what you're talking about is a huge trend in this country to begin with before the pandemic, which is people moving from primary cities to secondary cities. But I also think there's an existential thing that happens at people who become parents, and if you live in cities, you've spent your whole life, essentially everything has been about achievement, which is a very selfish thing, and it's a very external thing, right? You want to be in the mix, you want to go out, you're trying to meet people, you're having fun, you're trying to make as much money as possible and do well in the workplace. Then you have a family and everything kind of gets inverted, and all that stuff kind of becomes not just insignificant, but I would say trivial. And you realize, I don't know, at least for me, my value system has completely flipped on its head where now I want just a smaller life. I want less overhead. I want to work less. I want to just spend more time being with my family and doing nothing. And I'm, it's like, I'm like, oh, well, also I'm tired. Like I don't want to work anymore, but also I only really care about is being around with my family. And so, yeah, that seeking out simplicity thing is not just a national trend, but it's something that I think happens at this stage of life. And by the way, my wife and I were getting on the road in November, packing up the car, driving to the East Coast. We're gonna test drive a few cities over the course of 3 or 4 months, and potentially move there next year. We're looking at Nashville. We're looking at Chapel Hill. I mean, I don't know where we end up. Charleston. I think it's probably gonna be Nashville, is my guess.
You guys are talking about a major change there.
Things are happening, dude. We're going for it.
That's beautiful. I know in my when I turned 30, my goal was to have a nice condo downtown. And as soon as I turned 40, and I think it was a combination of turning 40, having kids, as well as the pandemic. Now we are literally looking at acres of land that are, not a whole bunch of acres, but just a farmhouse out somewhere secluded. As long as they have Wi-Fi, I'm good.
Yes, and hasn't the pandemic just brought all of that? It's accelerated the need for all of us. First of all, I think it's accelerated the realization for all of us that we don't have to put up with this.
Yeah,
and we can live anywhere. But also, I think it's to help us to all prioritize. Oh, like this is actually how we should be living, like chilling with a smaller crew and spending, making work fit our lives instead of lives fit our work. I mean, it's a good deal. I'd like to keep doing it.
I always feel bad when when people ask me how I'm doing in the pandemic, because I know how unbelievably crazy things are. 200,000 people have died. A lot of people are unemployed.
Yes, but inside the house, you're loving it.
Inside the house, I could not have imagined something that would have been better for me and my wife. I joke about this all the time, but it's true. It took my wife 10 years in a pandemic. My wife and I 10 years in a pandemic to learn how to be married successfully.
I love that. But you know what? I think that's actually one of the great beauties. I think it speaks to the idea, by the way, that during our deepest, darkest moments, sometimes we find the most beautiful, the most beautiful things. And I think I've had that exact same experience as you and your wife had.
Awesome. Let's take a look at the second clip, because there's a lot more in episode 2 that I want to joke with you about.
Okay.
Japan built a strong education system after World War II. 99% of their elementary schools are public. At first glance, this classroom of first graders seemed like the ones we have in the US. That was about to change.
What is this? Mahaley.
No.
The funniest, you and your wife's expressions while in Japan really showed a stark contrast of the anxiety that we have here in America, especially when I believe he was 6 years old. The little boy was sent on an errand by himself, and I had anxiety all in my stomach as
Isn't that wild?
And then I saw your face and you and your wife's face, and I'm like, oh, they understand. Talk about that.
Oh, this is so it's this crazy tradition that they have where, basically what they do is they start off with extreme attachment, literally holding the kid close to them and being really close to them through the first 6 years of their lives. And then at the age of 6, they have this ritual where, or it's a tradition where called the first errand. And literally the kid puts on, I guess it's got like a credit card in there and then like one of those one-way cell phones. And he goes by himself to buy groceries. And we tailed this kid like stalkers. And it was wild because nobody, like it wasn't weird to anyone. And he was just he was crossing streets, walking through this city, going to the grocery store, getting what he needed. He was incredibly confident, lots of poise. And checked out, came back. I mean, it was wild. And it brought up a couple questions. One, that we don't really, we would never trust our kids to do something like that. But also, I don't know that it's safe enough. As my daughter, by the way, walks by, I don't know if you can hear her.
You know what's funny? I didn't know if that was your kid or mine, so I wasn't going to say it.
No, this is one of the beauties of pandemic conversations. Exactly. My kids come into everything so far. But yeah, that's a wild tradition, right? Also, I don't know that it's safe enough. That it really says a lot about the safety thing, and I mean, we wouldn't let our kids travel.
I could not imagine. I don't want to be that dad, but my kids really won't go to the mailbox. But I mean, they're 2, 5, and 8 or somewhere around there. I might have gotten that wrong, but they really won't go out into the street by themselves. Like I have to urge them to go out in the streets, and I try to encourage them to be adventurous, but there's just a level of distrust and anxiety, particularly here in the United States, that I feel like, I don't know, did they program it out of their society there? I mean, there were some downsides, and there's a lot that people should watch in that episode because it was not all rosy. But in particular, the safety for children seemed to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get too much into the details in the episode, but the fact of the matter is Japan is an extremely homogenous country where there's pretty much a fear for authority. Some would say respect, others say fear, but they don't lock up their bikes and the kids can walk around, and crime is punished pretty heavily. Here, conversely, we live in a time right now where more information than ever is available. And as a result, we just don't let our kids travel that far.
Yeah.
I think the average distance that a kid travels now is something like a tenth of what it was 20 to 30 years ago. And if you ask most parents whether or not today is more dangerous than back then, pretty much every parent would say it is. But in fact, it's not less dangerous. We just know more things and we're more scared.
Yeah. But the name of the show is Ravi Patel's Pursuit of Happiness. It is on HBO Max. I wish we had more time because I think it was a really great thing that you did in that show about life and cycles of life. And whether you know it or not, you had some really fascinating political commentary in there. And I suggest everyone checks it out. Ravi, thank you so much for your time.
No, thanks for having me, man. It's a fun conversation.
Pleasure was mine.
All right, take care.
Take care, my friend.
See you, man.
A person needs new experiences. They jar something deep inside. Without change, something sleeps inside us. The sleeper must awaken.
We are here today to make sure that we honor the legacy of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's extraordinarily important that we understand the stakes of this vacancy. Our reproductive rights are on the line. Our labor rights are on the line. Our right to health care is on the line. Labor and union protections are on the line. Our climate is on the line. All of our rights, the rights that so many people died for, all of those rights are at risk with this appointment.
The sleeper has awakened!
right, welcome to Young Turks. Cenk Ugarianik is sparing with you guys. So obviously we've got a lot to say about what is going to happen with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat, as I've been promising you all weekend. We've got tape on that, and we've got options for you guys. I also want to tell you, as I often do at the beginning of this show, about some upcoming programming. This one's on Thursday. There's actually two on Thursday. One is make sure you're checking out TYT Sports on Twitch. Ricky does a great interactive show. You guys can talk to him there. That's at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/TYT. Okay. Now, on the same night, on Thursday, September 24th, we're actually presenting the Imagen Awards. It's their 35th annual awards, and Ida Rodriguez is hosting. You guys are going to love it. It's at 8 o'clock Eastern right here. So when I say right here, tyt.com/live, but it's also up on all of our channels, YouTube, Facebook, and all of our platforms. So you could watch it anywhere where we are. Okay, so those are great shows. We got another great show coming up for you guys tomorrow, which I'm going to tell you more about later. But let's get started, because giant news, obviously, with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right. All right, let's do it. So Donald Trump is committed to choosing a Supreme Court nominee, he says, as soon as the end of this week. And of course, this is meant to fill the vacant seat left behind following the passing of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, he shared his thoughts during a recent interview with Fox News. Let's take a quick listen to what he had to say.
There are actually 5 I'm looking at. It's down to 5. And they're all, it could be any one of them. They'll all be great. These are really top people. To get on that list, I created a list.
Mr. President, who's the other 2?
I'd rather not say, but they're 2 fantastic people. So I'm looking at 5, probably 4, but I'm looking at 5 very seriously. I'm going to make a decision on either Friday or Saturday. I will announce it either Friday or Saturday.
So he will announce his decision late this week, either Friday or Saturday, as you heard in that clip. And I would argue that part of the reason why he didn't name the other 2 potential Supreme Court nominees is because he knows nothing about any of the nominees, including the individuals on his list. You're going to see why I think that in just a minute. But first, let me give you some background information that I do think is relevant when it comes to this fight. Number one, there are some Republican senators who disagree with holding a vote for a Supreme Court pick until after the election. They want to wait until after the election to do it. 2 moderate Republicans, I wouldn't say they're moderate, I'll explain why in a second, but Senators Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski not support a vote on nominee before voters decide whether Trump will hold office for a second term. Democrats need just 2 more of the 53 GOP members in the Senate to peel off to stymie the effort. So there are some Republicans who might agree with Collins and Murkowski. For instance, you have Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney hasn't committed to anything yet, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is urging Republican senators to keep their powder dry and not commit to anything. But Collins and Murkowski are facing tough re-election battles. Well, Collins certainly is. And in both states, Donald Trump's approval rating is pretty low. And so it's not really about their ideological beliefs. It's more about maintaining their political positions and their place in the Senate. Also, when you look at public polling, you'll see that the majority of Americans, 62%, agreed the vacancy should be filled by the winner of November 3rd. So, of course, the general election, while 23% disagreed and the rest said they were not sure. 8 out of 10 Democrats felt this way, and 5 in 10 Republicans, surprisingly, also felt this way. So, Cenk, before we get to some details about the potential Supreme Court picks, I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm actually surprised it's 5 out of 10 Republicans, but maybe it's because they really drilled into everybody's head through Fox News and other outlets. Remember, it is definitely a rule that you do not fill a Supreme Court seat the year before an election, because that was the Mitch McConnell rule that they put on Merrick Garland. And I guess it takes a couple of days or weeks to undo that brainwashing and put in new brainwashing saying, no, actually, when it's super close to an election, it's awesome to fill the seat. So that's what Fox News and Trump and McConnell are busy doing now. So we'll see how the polling moves. But right now, that message hasn't gotten to some Republicans. Probably by the end of this process, instead of it being 5 out of 10 Republicans, it'll be 2 out of 10 Republicans who think that they shouldn't fill that seat. Most will think that they will. So now, are the Republicans going to fill that seat? Of course they are. I mean, Jess writes in our member section, the Republicans do not care about being called out for their lies nor their hypocrisy. They only care about their power. That's 100% right. I love our members, tyt.com/join to become one. So in terms of Trump, he wants it before the election. Now, anyone who thinks that this is anything but political is hilarious. So your point about Collins is 100% true, but it has a second part of it that's very important. She's saying, hey, we got to wait till election day. Okay. But remember, the most likely outcome is that they confirm the person in the lame duck session. That's after Election Day and before the new Congress is seated. So I would be shocked if the Susan Collins of the world, if after losing their election was like, no, you know what? I said it, so I'm just going to stay with it. No, all that the GOP cares about is power. So they will do whatever it takes to get that person in that seat.
Look, if I were a Republican voter, I'm keeping it real. I'd be super proud of them, right? You think Republicans care about hypocrisy? No, they want control. They want power. And Republican lawmakers are going to do what it takes to ensure that they accumulate that power and they get that Supreme Court vacancy filled by someone who's ideologically similar to themselves and the Republican electorate. That's how politics works. And unfortunately, we don't have the same line of thinking when it comes to Democratic leadership. And we'll get into details about that later on in the show. We have a story produced specifically for that topic. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the names that have come up recently in regard to Trump's Supreme Court nominee. He has said that he wants to choose a woman, number one. And among the judges thought to be likely candidates are Amy Coney Barrett. We've actually heard her name before, a favorite of social conservatives who sits on the Chicago-based 7th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, and Barbara Lagoa, a recent addition to the 11th Circuit, which is located in Atlanta. Now, I'm going to get into details about Barrett in just a second, but to go back to the point about how Trump knows nothing about any of these nominees, he knows nothing about the people he put on his potential nominee list, get a load of how he answered questions about Lagoa specifically. Take a look.
First on Lagoa, this is the first time we had a chance to look at her bio outside legal circles. We know about Judge Barrett. Tell me about Lagoa and what made her a finalist and what might tip the scales her direction.
Well, she's excellent. She's Hispanic. She's a terrific woman from everything I know. I don't know her. Florida. We love Florida. So she's got a lot of things, very smart. They're all very smart. We don't have to say that.
She's got a lot of things. She's very smart. So he knows nothing about Lagoa. And the reason why Republican lawmakers, particularly Republican lawmakers out of Florida, like her is because she's a Cuban American, and the Latino vote is incredibly important. So they're hoping that Trump chooses her because it could help when it comes to a possible contested general election. Go ahead, Cenk.
She is woman. Camera TV, Florida. So I like her. My advisors told me it could help me win Florida in the election. Did I mention she's Hispanic? No, you're supposed to say things about her judicial career. You're supposed to at least bother pretending that you care about the legal aspect of this rather than purely political aspect of it. In fact, you're supposed to pretend that politics is an afterthought. Oh, I mean, the politics. No, really, I really care about judicial principles here. Now, look, in a sense, I enjoy that he gets rid of the normal theatrics of politics, because every politician that does tell you that they care about her judicial record and not about politics is lying. They're all lying. They only care about the politics of it, Republicans and Democrats, except the Democrats' version of politics is lay down and immediately surrender, which is what they're starting to do on this issue. So, Anna, you could tell he didn't make the list when in the earlier clip he insisted, now this is the list I put together. He doesn't even know the other two. They asked him the other two. He couldn't name their name right now, even after the interview. He didn't bother learning anything. That would require reading past a page or reading past 3 names. Of course he doesn't know them, and of course all he cares about is the politics. He's just so ham-handed that he actually admits it.
I know, and he's never been punished in any way, politically speaking, for refusing to do his homework. I mean, he's gotten by with giving incredibly vague answers on everything, from Supreme Court nominees to his so-called policy proposals. His voters don't care. But when it comes to the ability to pack the courts with conservative judges, his supporters do care. And oftentimes they do refer to that when they're confronted with questions about how Trump failed to deliver on a host of other issues. And so I do think that this is something that's going to energize Trump's base. And Cenk, look, I want Democrats to fight. I do think that there might be some avenues in which they can fight this, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do think that Democrats hurt themselves. I mean, first with what they did in 2013 by essentially getting rid of, the 60 vote threshold in order to confirm nominees. Now, that did not apply to Supreme Court nominees. But then in 2017, Mitch McConnell's like, I don't like the way they're treating Gorsuch, so I'm going to get rid of this 60 vote threshold as it pertains to Supreme Court nominees. And instead, we're going to use a simple majority, which is why in this particular case, all Republicans need is a simple majority. That's it. They don't need a 60 senator threshold in order to, hold a vote and to approve this nominee. So that's just something to keep in mind. And so, I mean, I don't know how you feel about that. I feel like in case after case, Democrats change the rules in ways that then later come back and bite them in the butt.
No, look, I've said it 1,000 times, they're paid to lose. Because I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking. I told you as Harry Reid was changing that rule, hey, schmuck, why would you change the rule on filibusters when all the polling indicates that you're about to become the minority in the Senate? So you're gift wrapping something that you could have used for 8 years of Obama that you chose not to use, but you're going to gift wrap it for the Republicans when they get in charge and control the Senate. And people are like, oh, no, Jake, you don't understand. They play 3-dimensional chess. No, he played 1-dimensional checkers. And so, of course, the Republicans then captured the majority in the Senate and did everything that they wanted because of how incredibly dumb Harry Reid and all of the Democrats are. I mean, you're going to see how dumb they are in this particular case as we talk about it later in the show. They couldn't do real politics against Republicans if their life depended on it. And, of course, the whole game is that corporate donors pay them to play the patsies, the controlled opposition. So the controlled opposition is supposed to lose, and that's what they're in the middle of doing now.
And finally, since I promised, who is Amy Coney Barrett? Well, she is extremely conservative, which certainly worries advocates of reproductive rights. She says that she does not allow her Catholic religion to influence the rulings she hands down or the decisions that she makes. Democrats pointed to comments she made at Notre Dame years before about being a different kind of lawyer. She said, we should always remember that a legal career is but a means to an end, and that end is building the kingdom of God. Out of law school, she clerked for Antonin Scalia, who she considers a mentor and with whom she shares a belief in originalism, which is the idea that judges should attempt to interpret the words of the Constitution as the authors intended when they were written. And so, look, a lot of people are worried about the reversal of Roe v. Wade with a majority conservative court. I totally understand that. Other things to be worried about include the absolute overwhelming repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would mean that Americans would no longer have protections against insurers denying them for pre-existing conditions. There really is a lot on the line here. And even though everyone's focusing on Roe v. Wade, which is important, I'm not trying to diminish that, there are a number of other issues that would negatively impact Americans overall that go beyond reproductive rights.
And if we lose the Affordable Care Act right now, coronavirus becomes a pre-existing condition. Boom. And that's another 6 million people who can't get insurance. So that's if you just stop right now. Reality is that'll be well over 10 million by the time that this is done. So, and by the way, Citizens United will then become permanent. So it's disaster on top of disaster. One more comment from our members, because it's such a good one. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders wrote, and that's their title actually on our website. I think Trump voters are on board for waiting until after the election because they're 100% sure that Trump is going to win. So it's less about principles and more about what's the rush. It's true. In their world, Trump has a 90% chance of winning. So they're like, who cares? Let's just do it after the election. What difference does it make? Because we all live in our own bubbles and they can't read polling. But look, it's got everybody energized. Just in the time we were doing this video, people who became members by clicking the join button below on YouTube, Barry Wheeler, Maricela Guillen, Curbside Odin, Adona Langer, Mary Gladstone, LPS Grace, 331. So look, we got to be stronger. Progressives have to be stronger because corporate Democrats are never going to do the job. So I hope they can step out of the way and let us actually work effectively to block whoever Trump is going to appoint.
All right, let's move on to our next story.
To be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning. Sunday morning. We have a responsibility. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. We have a responsibility to meet the needs of the American people.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's interview with George Stephanopoulos over the weekend did not inspire much confidence among Democratic voters who want Democratic lawmakers to fight back against Donald Trump attempting to fill a vacant Supreme Court seat left behind by Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg due to her passing. Now, in the rest of the interview, maybe she says something that does inspire some confidence. Maybe she says something strong. But if you've been following Nancy Pelosi for years now, you should know better than to expect that, because when it comes to simple things she can do, like refusing to fund the next spending bill, that kind of stuff seems to be off the table. Here she is giving us more of what she's unwilling to do.
You said you want people to get out there and vote, but even that's no guarantee that the White House and Senate Republicans won't try to push through a Supreme Court nomination in a lame duck session, even if Joe Biden wins on November 3rd, even if Democrats pick up seats in the House and maybe even the Senate. So what can you do then? Some have mentioned the possibility, if they try to push through a nominee in a lame duck session, that you and the House could move to impeach President Trump or Attorney General Barr as a way of stalling and preventing the Senate from acting on this nomination.
Well, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now. But the fact is, we have a big challenge in our country. This president has threatened to not even accept the results of the election with statements that he and his henchmen have made. So right now, our main goal, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want that to be, would be to protect the integrity of the election as we protect the American people from the coronavirus.
Now, Cenk, I haven't seen her do anything when it comes to protecting the integrity of the elections. She held hearings for Postmaster Louis DeJoy, who we know was trying to dismantle the post office to make it difficult for people to vote by mail. I don't know what action she specifically took following those hearings. Just over the weekend, Trump protesters were blocking voters from entering polling stations in Virginia. I haven't really seen much action from Democratic leadership when it comes to protecting our election process. I also don't see any strength from her when it comes to fighting back against Trump's potential Supreme Court nominee. But maybe I'm missing something. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, so far, every Democrat that's gone on TV has been an absolute disaster and only hurt our cause. So I'm going to be very specific about what I mean by that. So I don't want you to think it's loose talk. So sure, first there's her general appearance, which was just disastrous. If you watch the whole interview, that line she had that we showed you in the beginning about "Good morning, it's Sunday" was not at the beginning of the interview. It was weirdly in the middle of the interview. It made no sense at all. And so you could tell Stephanopoulos, who, keep it real, is a huge corporate Democrat, and wants to help Pelosi. When Pelosi was saying that, had this look on his face like, oh, that's uncomfortable, right? And so I don't know what she thought she was saying there, but that's the least of it. So she kept using her talking points about how they were going to crush coronavirus, but Trump wouldn't let them crush coronavirus. She must have said that about 5, 6, 7 times. Concentrate. He's asking you about the Supreme Court. I know you want to do your regular talking points about the election. God bless. Squeeze that in once or twice, but answer the questions. And if you don't, you look weird. He's asking you specific questions, which are really important. And that is when you should energize Democratic voters, not with generic poll tested stuff from a month ago, but from stuff today when everybody's super mad about Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing away and Mitch McConnell and the Republicans being hypocrites. This is when you go on TV to hit them and hit them hard. Instead, she comes on TV, and in that interview, she said, blocking the continuing resolution on the budget? Nope. We would never do that. So we'll not shut down the government. Raising the debt ceiling. Stephanopoulos didn't specifically ask about that. He should have, although he did a great job on the interview overall. And she basically said for both of those options, which the House can do. I say we, but it's not, Democrats aren't we. Democratic leadership isn't we. If they actually were on our side, that would be the very first thing they would have as an option. If the Republicans violate their own rule, it forces us to not have any further votes. And the way you don't have further votes is you block the continuing resolution and the debt ceiling. She immediately took that off the table. Okay, so already the surrender has begun. So you went on TV to help Republicans by telling them, don't worry, we will not use the most powerful tool in our arsenal. Then she talks about, all the quivers are in my, all the arrows are in my quiver. No, they're not. You just took a giant one off. Then Tim Kaine goes on TV and says, we definitely won't do impeachment. No Democratic senator is in favor of that. Boom, there goes all of your leverage. They just destroyed all of our leverage and surrendered on day one.
So I actually really do want to go to that Tim Kaine video because Tim Kaine is a senator. And so, and we never hear from Tim Kaine. So finally he comes out of the shadows and has something to say, but it's the worst statement at a time when people are desperately seeking Democratic leadership. Look.
Would you support impeaching either President Trump or Attorney General Bill Barr as a way to essentially delay the Senate on a vote for the president's court nominee?
Foolish idea. I can't see virtually any Senate Democrats agreeing with it.
Okay, so that seems off the table. What about the idea of, if you win a Senate majority next year and Republicans do get this nomination through, adding more seats to the Supreme Court?
I'm not playing an if game. What I'm doing, Hallie, is asking Republicans to be true to their word. So I'm just asking, are there 4 Republicans who are willing to keep their word to the American public?
Senator, I understand you don't want to talk hypotheticals, but this is potentially a reality here. I want to just ask you where you are on these positions.
Hallie, you can ask me hypotheticals, but that doesn't mean I'm focused on them. I'm focused on trying to convince Republicans to keep their word to the American public. I don't want Republicans to try to destroy the Senate as an institution or the Supreme Court as an institution. If they decide to violate their promises and violate their principles and just say, well, the only thing that matters is raw power. If you got the votes, you can do whatever you want. I don't think that's going to work out well for them, and I don't think it's going to work out well for the American public. So I just hope some of them will keep their word.
No.
Just embarrassing, unbelievably embarrassing that at this point in Trump's first term, that he thinks that, maybe I can pressure Republican lawmakers to do the right thing, to have some moral high ground and actually follow through on what they promised to follow through on. Because remember, Lindsey Graham and other Republican senators, after blocking Merrick Garland, argued that they would, do the same if Trump or a Republican president tried to nominate a Supreme Court justice during an election year. It is about raw power. We all know that. Tim Kaine knows that. It's just, I feel like they want to lose. It's like there has to be some reason behind it. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay. No, guys. So let me quickly go over, because I did another video about this, the 5 different ways that Democrats can actually do something about this. One is block every vote, demand unanimous consent in the Senate. Now, that doesn't block it for good. What it does is it slows things down. So far, they have not shown any inclination to go in that direction, but no one has taken that off the table. Continuing resolution and debt ceiling. Those are 2 and 3. Pelosi took those off the table in her ABC interview. Impeachment. Tim Kaine just took that off the table and said no Democratic senator wants to do that, even though it would be super simple and would actually be effective because it gets prioritized above actual confirmation hearings on the Senate. So the Senate would not have a choice. So it would be very effective. Kaine eliminated that now. And then the last part is packing the court, because the court is not, 9 members is not in the Constitution. That is statutory. And you actually can put as many people on the Supreme Court as you want. And now it is a harsh thing to do, but at the very minimum, you need to keep that as a possibility to threaten to have leverage, right? Tim Kaine took it off the table. So they literally have nothing left on the table because their 2 idiots went on TV and said, we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do that, and we're not going to do that. So Republicans, do whatever you want. And guys, I call them idiots for 2 reasons, okay? If it was an accountant or a plumber or a dentist, I wouldn't call them idiots, because I'd say, hey, listen, they don't know all the inner workings of politics, both legislatively and technically what they could do in the Senate and the House, and they don't know how this game is played. It's okay. But this is their job. And the second reason is the mainstream media come and gaslight you and tell you that these guys are master legislators. No, Tim Kaine, if you take all of our leverage off the table when you go on television, that means you went on television to help Republicans, not to help Democrats. And so what was his answer? So his answer was, and you saw it with your own eyes, I believe I could put pressure on the Republicans to do the right thing if I just talk to you on TV and say, now, guys, remember what you promised. No, but that's my point. No one can be that stupid. Like, literally. Then Tim Kaine is the most naive, foolish, ridiculous man in Washington. Or he's trying to help Republicans. He just went on there. No Republican could have done a better job in assuring fellow Republicans that they would get exactly what they want. How could you have sat through the last 20 years, let alone the last 4 years, let alone what happened to Merrick Garland, and say that we think we can get Republican senators to do the right thing and not just to do something for their own power? No, you'd have to be the dumbest man in America. Remember, Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's pick to be her VP, because the Democrats never, ever want to fight for our side. All they care about is their own privilege and power. They sicken me.
When we come back from the break, we'll show you how little Republican lawmakers care about being called hypocrites. And Cenk has a fun announcement about Wolfpack. We'll be right back.
Many of you already know that the TYT Army has been officially organizing for the past year. They're making decisions on which candidates and elected officials to help, and always coming up with ways to inform people about progressive policies. Now, we want to give a huge shout out to some special volunteers and highlight accomplishments of our TYT Army. In Michigan, State Leader Tara West and Captain Justine Robinson organized the team's first Beer and Politics. How fun does that sound? Look, they thought of this idea at one of their monthly meetups in order to help connect TYT supporters and grow their team's volunteers. Here's what Tara had to say. Our first Beer and Politics event in Grand Rapids was a success. We had 5 new people show up who are enthusiastic about TYT. They all found out about our event through our text bank, and they liked the laid-back nature of our get-together. Looking forward to connecting with them next month and hopefully meeting a few more. Thank you, Tara and Justine, for leading the way in Michigan. To learn more about the TYT Army and how you can help from home or even start your own team, head to tyt.com/army. Check your spam folder for lost emails to stay up to date with our events.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations, so if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
Like all small businesses, we're struggling through this pandemic right now. We are doing a drive to keep TYT healthy. We want to be able to keep doing it, and it's been a Herculean task.
Ready for transport.
We're trying to raise $2 million overall, $200,000 a month if we can. If you can, and only if you can, tyt.com/go. Seriously, because we can't sustain this show without you. So thank you for making all this possible.
Where else can I feel as free as I do here to do what I do? And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for all the people who have really carried us throughout the years.
You're our ultimate boss. We report to you guys, and if you don't like what we're doing on air or we're not telling the truth, boom, you fire us.
We're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks.
Keep TYT alive, healthy, wonderful, awesome, independent, progressive. Keep it all those things. In fact, we have a new theme, Press On. Get it? It's a double meaning. tyt.com/go. I know what you're thinking. Cenk, where do I get unlimited, commission-free stock and ETF trades? Man, do I have good news for you. doe.com/TYT. Yes, it's really unlimited trading. Yes, it's totally commission-free. Yes, they explain what an ETF is if you don't know it. That's what's great about Doe, because they have wonderful explainer videos, and you got zero minimum balance. You got nothing for commissions. doe.com/TYT.
Today, a terrible day for the internet, a terrible day for America. The internet as we know it is not going to exist anymore.
A real dark day for information, and yet another way that they're bleeding out the democracy.
We're now going to have these gatekeepers of information deciding what we can and can't see, and that's what scares me the most.
Whether you're conservative or progressive or anywhere in the middle, this is the one thing we should all agree to. Protect the internet, because the establishment is coming for it. Don't let them destroy the internet.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Let me give you guys some comments as usual, and then I got an important announcement for you guys. LMG15 writes in, at this point, I have to believe that McConnell gets off on being the #1 hypocrite in American politics. Yeah, he does enjoy his role, and I don't blame him for it. And he says he's the grim reaper of all democratic ideas. So he at least understands how politics works. He is in the opposition, and he's excellent in opposing democratic and progressive ideas, whereas our side is a bunch of fools and nincompoops. And I think he does enjoy it. Someone who likes Bernie Sanders, another good comment. I don't care if there are arrows in her quiver if she doesn't fire any of them. That's exactly right. And so that's our members on our website, tyt.com/join. On YouTube, since I last read the names, Ground Loop Events, Drizzt12, and Joseph Losada have joined. And you can do that by hitting the join button right underneath the video on YouTube. Willie Thomas on YouTube Super Chat says, impotent, plain and simple, referring to the Democrats. Jason R says, start impeachment on Barr now. We'll stall before the election, then Trump again during the lame duck. That's right. If you don't start now, you won't be able to make it in time. By the time that the election's over, they'll have already gone through all of the process, and all they'll need is a vote. So that's the game plan. They're very likely going to do it in the lame duck session. And that's when, after the Democrats refuse to do anything, they will say there was nothing we could do. So that's the same playbook that we've seen 20 different times. By the way, apparently every reporter in Washington is a moron because they can't see that same playbook that you yourself have seen now dozens of times. Dozens. But none of the reporters report, hey, these same moron Democrats are saying, hey, there's nothing we can do, when there's actually half a dozen things they could do. So anyway, I got to tell you about Wolfpack. So Wolfpack's having its annual conference this upcoming weekend, and it starts on Friday, goes all the way through Sunday, and there's going to be some great things. So first of all, you're going to learn a lot about how you can actually get money out of politics. This isn't hypothetical, it's real. You actually can do it. Both the Republican and Democratic parties are generally fighting against that because they love money in politics, but there's a nonpartisan group. So if you go to wolf-pack.com/workshop, that's the workshop that's happening this weekend. You can register for free, so you could RSVP for free, so you can see all of what we're doing. And we're actually going to have a lot of fun, too. I'm going to tell you about that in a second. But if you want to be part of Team Cenk, go to wolf-pack.com/Cenk. Now, what's Team Cenk? The Wolfpack guys, they want me to run with the pack. So they got me doing a 5K and trying to monitor my steps. So if you want to do that with me and you monitor your steps too, and you can see my progress and we run for freedom together, let's make a run for it, okay? You go to wolf-pack.com/Cenk. And meanwhile, by the way, if you want to donate through either one of those, that's great. We love it. You don't have to, okay? And if you do $10 registration for the workshop, then you get to vote on the polls. You get to vote on making me do push-ups in the middle of the run, all these fun things. Anna and I are going to play Pictionary on Saturday night. I don't want you to miss that. We're going to sing karaoke. Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty are going to join us for a panel. Larry Lessig, the preeminent expert on this issue and many others from Harvard Law, is going to come give a speech about how you actually can get money out of politics and show you the way to do it. So one more time, guys, sign up now. And again, you can do it for free. And I really want to see you guys there because this is when we all unite to make sure that we fight the corruption in Washington. So wolf-pack.com/workshop. Thank you. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. Well, one of the things that Republican lawmakers do not care about is being called hypocrites. They are hypocrites. They've proven themselves to be hypocrites. But when it comes to power being on the line, they'll go with power, even if they know they're going to be called hypocrites. And that's the case with filling the Supreme Court seat left vacant by Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing. Now, one of the wishes RBG's wishes before she passed, according to what her granddaughter says, was, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. Republicans don't care. In fact, Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, is determined to hold a vote on Trump's pick. Here's what he said. In the last midterm election before Justice Scalia's death in 2016, Americans elected a Republican Senate majority because we pledged to check and balance the last days of a lame duck president's second term. President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. But as you guys can recall, in 2016, Mitch McConnell specifically referenced the fact that Merrick Garland was the Supreme Court pick for Obama during an election year. So he was basically saying it's an election year. This is not the right time. This is not when we do it. That was in February of 2016. Now, fast forward to 2020, and there's a Supreme Court vacancy in September of 2020. And all of a sudden, Mitch McConnell says that he's going to go ahead and hold a vote for whoever Donald Trump nominates. Now, let me fast forward to Lindsey Graham. Following what happened to Garland in 2016, Lindsey Graham had some strong views on what should happen in the future. Let's take a look at what he said in 2016.
This is the last year of a lame duck president. And if Ted Cruz or Donald Trump get to be president, they've all asked us not to confirm or take up a selection by President Obama. So if a vacancy occurs in their last year of their first term, guess what? You will use their words against them. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me, and you'd be absolutely right. We're setting a precedent here today, Republicans are, that in the last year, at least of a lame duck 8-year term, I would say it's going to be a 4-year term, that you're not going to fill a vacancy of the Supreme Court. This may make you feel better, but I really don't care. If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
He's on the record because he doesn't care if he decides to go against his own word and if people decide to call him hypocrites, because guess what? It doesn't matter. Republican voters are going to support Republican lawmakers and their quest for power. And that's what's happening today. On Saturday morning, Trump was resolute in his call for Ginsburg's seat to be filled immediately. He tweeted, quote, "We have this obligation without delay." A short time later, Graham responded, quote, "I fully understand where President Donald Trump is coming from," he said, retweeting the president's comments. "As to my view of filling a Supreme Court vacancy in 2020, I'd encourage you to review these most recent statements," he added, citing his remarks to NBC News in August that the rules have changed. They don't care, guys. And like, what amazes me, Cenk, and I know this probably drove you crazy too, is how many reporters over the weekend were like, oh, the hypocrisy. No one cares. No one cares. Yeah, they're hypocritical. They're gonna do what it takes to stack the courts with as many conservative judges as humanly possible. By the way, Chuck Schumer struck a deal with Senate Republicans to make that process a lot easier for them when it comes to the lower courts. And when it comes to a Supreme Court pick, of course they're going to do what it takes to fill that seat with someone who is ideologically similar to them. It's just the way politics works. Anyone who thinks otherwise is incredibly naive and pathetic.
So almost all the reporters in Washington and almost the entire Democratic Party, and certainly all of Democratic leadership, act like it's 40 years ago. So what's the difference between now and 40 years ago? Well, what happened was a number of Supreme Court decisions in the late 1970s changed everything. They allowed corporations to give unlimited money to politicians, thereby purchasing the Republican and Democratic parties. And ever since that happened, the Republican Party became incredibly strong to the point of being absolutely vicious. And the Democratic Party became incredibly feckless when they used to be very strong under Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson would intimidate, bully, and get things passed and done. They were very effective. FDR, all these Democrats were super effective. Now they've become weaklings and losers because of the donor class. The donor class funds very strong Republicans and very weak Democrats. But the media still pretends that it's 40, 50 years ago. So the media will be like, oh my God, the Republicans are they being hypocritical? First of all, I mean, what kind of a schmuck are you? Your job is to cover politics, and you didn't notice until this moment that Republicans are hypocritical. Because they pay you to be neutral, to say, and every editor you have yells at you, don't worry about the facts. Just make everything a he said, she said. Go get a quote from a Republican, go get a quote from a Democrat, and don't tell people what the reality is. Don't tell people that Mitch McConnell broke the record on filibustering, because that would make it seem one-sided. You know why? Because it is one-sided. And then he invented a thing called the McConnell rule, where you're not allowed to do Supreme Court picks in the last year before an election. And then he violated the McConnell rule 6 weeks before an election, because that's what Mitch McConnell does, and that's what the Republican Party does. And if you don't know that, and you still think it's 40, 50 years ago where they get into a bar, which is true, they used to, right? And they say, wait, are you a man of honor? And the other one would say, okay, fine, I'm a man of honor. And they'd spit into their hands and they'd do a handshake deal. And Biden and every anchor on CNN and Tim Kaine and all these folks still think we live in 1973 where they're going to spit in their hand and do a deal and the Republicans are going to honor it. How stupid are you?
To which I, say, David Gergen. David Gergen, who is an advisor to Richard Nixon, he's now a contributor on cable news, probably gets paid top dollar for the expert commentary he provides, including incredibly dumb, short-sighted commentary that you're about to hear.
For all the obvious reasons it's so brazenly contemptuous of fair play, it is so hypocritical that I think you're going to see that the Republicans will pay a price at the polls this November over this issue. It is, I think, that, among other things, I think it makes it more likely that Joe Biden will win the election. It makes it more likely that the Democrats will take over the Senate. And if Biden is the president, and then next year when he tries to heal things, I think it's going to make polarization even more poisonous, almost irreversible.
That was insane. That's my opinion, but my opinion is based in fact and evidence. This has fired up Trump's base. This has fired up voters. And when it comes to the Supreme Court, I mean, historically speaking, Democratic voters seem to care less about Supreme Court nominees compared to Republican voters. I mean, Donald Trump has slapped his own base across the face over and over and over again. And when you ask them, what is it about Trump that you like? Why are you sticking by his side? They'll mention that Trump has stacked the courts with conservative judges. Also, Reuters had this poll to see how much of an influence this Supreme Court vacancy has for voters. And they found that 30% of American adults said that Ginsburg's death will make them more likely to vote for Biden, while 25% said they're now more likely to vote for Trump. But keep in mind that Donald Trump hasn't even really begun campaigning on this yet. This is an issue that a lot of voters care about. He's going to really latch onto it and repeat how important it is for him to get reelected. And look, his voters were already super fired up to begin with. We'll talk about this later in the show. There are Trump supporters literally blocking people from voting, going into voting locations in Virginia, which has already begun early voting. I think it's crazy to think that these hypocritical politicians are going to be punished. Bad boys for trying to accumulate power for Republican voters. They don't like that. Okay, they want to see that you're a man of your word. Come on, man.
It's just, now look, I know why people are on TV. Almost every one of them is put on there to maintain the current system and to keep the currently rich and powerful going forward. And so I'm not under any illusion that they're doing news. But the way that it works is not that somebody writes a memo. Sometimes that happens, but more rarely. It's that there's a groupthink. And so they hire everyone that has the same groupthink. And in that groupthink, they've now become complete schmucks and totally disassociated from reality. So to Anna's point, you think that there are Republican and independent voters who'll say, this offends my sense of fair play. You know what? I'm thinking of switching over and voting for a Democrat. On which planet? No, come on, really? Really, David Gergen? That's the analyst CNN brought on to say, well, it might offend their sense of fair play. Dude, inside your country club, that might be the case for 2 or 3 people, but that's not how voters are reacting now. Trump has lit the country on fire, and they haven't backed away 1 inch from him. You think they care about decorum? How could you possibly think that? How could you possibly think that? No. And so they appreciate that Trump is going to go out there and McConnell's going to go out there and go, yeah, I'm going to break every goddamn rule there is to make sure we have power and not the black people and the brown people. And the crowd's going to go nuts, right? And our side is supposed to say, we're going to protect women. We're going to make sure that they don't rob you of your liberty and your freedom to do what you want with your body, your most private choices. We're going to take their big government hands off of your body. They're disgusting, and we're going to fight back against them. Have you seen any Democrat do that? I mean, you'll see AOC later, but have you seen any corporate Democrats? Have you seen any of that? Nothing. Instead, they're like, oh, I do declare the Queensberry rules have been violated. We're going to beseech the American people that we go back to Queensberry rules, really, and we promise that we'll totally surrender because we will then prove that we are the nice guys, and that is why people will vote for us. And this is how Democrats lose all elections. Look, one last thing that's empirical. they said, you know what, the McConnell rule last time around, not confirming Merrick Garland, was an outrage. And it was. It broke every precedent. There was no such rule. They invented it. Everybody knew it. And people pointed out that it was completely outrageous to hold that up for over a year. And guess what happened? According to David Gergen and CNN and the New York Times and NPR, then the Democrats should have easily won the presidential election because the Republicans broke decorum. And who won? Do anybody remember? Oh, right, Donald Trump won. And did David Gergen or any other pundit on TV take that into consideration? Nope. It's 1973, and if we follow decorum, we will win. Insane. Let me say one last thing here. Brian Schatz is a Democratic senator. He tweeted this out, and there's something very telling in the middle of it. He said, it's going to be very hard after the procedural violence that Mitch McConnell has inflicted on the Senate and the country for anyone to justify us playing it soft next year just to satisfy pundits. I like what he's saying, but look at the assumption built in, and he's not wrong about the assumption. Every idiot pundit on TV will go on like David Gergen, and Schatz said this before Gergen went on, will go on and go, oh, the Democrats should surrender to the Republicans and play really, really nice. And once they've landed another Supreme Court seat and we're screwed for 30 years and they take away all of our rights, then we shall declare to the American people that they are bad boys and we are good boys. Losers. You should never listen to those pundits. And by the way, Brian Schatz, again, he's right about all this. And all the other Democratic senators, turn off your TV. Those morons are costing you elections. If you actually care to win an election, you listen to a progressive pundit.
All right, we'll be right back.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding, because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a. Call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
That 300 million is a pretty good number. We were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
I just shot a clip. It's time sensitive and it needs to be edited
right now.
Did anybody call for an editor? Need this in an hour. But you're an editor too.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Jing and Anna with you guys. Don't forget our Get Out the Vote special tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you tune in for that. Anna, what's next?
Well, the Department of Justice is retaliating against democratically run cities. So Trump's DOJ, under the leadership of William Barr, has basically cited cities such as New York, Seattle, and Portland as anarchist cities. And the purpose for that is to see if they could prevent the flow of federal money going to these municipalities. So the Trump administration has accused them of tolerating protests while decrying federal intervention. And so this is how they're punishing them. New York City, Portland, and Seattle are on a list of anarchist cities that Trump officials say have failed to stem crime linked to a summer of protests. Now, this is a follow-up of a memo that Trump released earlier this month. That memo directed Attorney General William Barr to identify jurisdictions that have permitted violence and the destruction of property to persist and have refused to undertake reasonable measures to counteract these criminal activities slash anarchist jurisdictions. So I want to just mention real quick that there's a ton of criminality that takes place within the Trump administration. We know that, we've detailed that. But if you want to focus solely on what happens during these protests, let us not forget that in case after case, especially in cities like New York, for instance, we have seen looting take place with cops nearby, and the cops do nothing about it. Instead, they had focused their force and their brutality toward peaceful protesters. They allowed the looting to take place. They turned a blind eye to that. And for some reason, it's the city's fault that the police chose to be brutal toward peaceful protesters and ignore the property damage that the Trump administration pretends to care so much about.
Yeah, there is no such thing as the city is now in anarchy and we will cut off your funding. Where does that say in the Constitution? What are you talking about? This is just totally invented thing out of whole cloth. We now declare you anarchists. Okay, I declare you the Easter Bunny. So what? So, of course, the whole point is to cut off funding. And is that constitutional? I mean, there's nothing to do with the Constitution. So they're going to try to, again, bend every law to their favor to try to score political points. I'm kind of bummed LA didn't make the list. I was planning on going out tonight and being like, there's anarchy. Let's go nuts. Okay.
Well, just wait, because they're still going to consider other cities. Now, things didn't get too heated in Los Angeles during the protest. There were some scuffles with cops. That certainly happened. But most of the headlines had to do with the fight between protesters and cops in those particular cities, in Portland, Seattle, and New York.
And they're putting these cities on a list. Why? Because they said because they were doing protests that they don't like. These are from the guys who are in favor of freedom of speech, and they're against cancel culture. They're trying to cancel whole cities at a time. The world's largest hypocrites. All right, we have an amazing post-game show for you guys. Don't miss it. Hit the join button below or tyt.com/join. We'll see you there right now. we're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the U.S. and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're going to make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's going to win. She's going to win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us. We're having fun. It's election night.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley. Down goes Crowley. Down goes Manafort. Down goes Cohen. Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This
That's
is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
Let's
flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this.
Cheers to Brett Ehrlich.
Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy! This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening?
No, that's just wrong.
Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was
That's a good point.
1965, and he was in Vietnam.
All right, back on the Young Turks post game for you guys. Let me just say hi to our new members that joined on YouTube right before that. Servan86, Nidimi, Jelly Castelline, and Colleen Tavolacci. So welcome, guys.
Nailed it.
Oh, yeah. So good with names and pronunciations. I'm going to read one YouTube super chat here, just because I think it's telling and we should keep it in mind. Timothy Spencer wrote in, my conservative mom says she's shocked that Pelosi isn't pushing harder. LOL, if she only knew. And that's the thing, Anna. People don't know what we know unless they watch the Young Turks. And I'm not just saying that. Look, or secular talk, or maybe read The Intercept. But the problem with The Intercept is that they don't cover all the news. They do in-depth stories, which is great, right? But only a couple of outlets give you just slivers of of what's reality, right? If you watch television, yeah, you think Nancy Pelosi is like a fire breather, that she's slayed 7 different dragons. And every day every time she comes up, they call her a master. Every pundit calls her a master legislator. So conservative voters, moderate voters, and mostly most Democratic voters think, well, you can't get any harder than Nancy Pelosi. She's just such a vicious fighter for the left. So we're screaming into the abyss. The reality is the abyss says, no, Pelosi's a fire-breathing champion of the left. And so that's why what we do is important. And by the way, you guys are members. You supporting what we do is so important. Because without us, all they have is a bunch of garbage. Either Fox News telling you that Nancy Pelosi's ripping people's heads off and, she's Attila the Hun and you should be careful, hilarious. Or CNN telling you something very similar, like, oh, she's so good. So no one actually tells the truth.
Yeah, so you reminded me of something I read, and I wish I could remember the name of the columnist, but it's like this longtime print columnist who just recently retired. And in his last column, he talked about how his career did nothing, right? Like he was just like, it's been decades, and I had any influence on anything? No, I haven't. And like he was okay with that, and I'm glad he wrote it because I need to also be okay with that. Like we're going to do our best, obviously. But yeah, I don't know why I'm sharing this. This is more about my midlife crisis situation, even though I'm not midlife yet. And my therapist thinks I am. How dare she? But anyway, I do want to make a quick, point. Yeah,
look, that's what the old school post games used to be about. And we'll come back to that when we go back to the 2-hour show at some point in life. But I don't agree with you at all, Anna. I think, and I don't want it to sound too self-aggrandizing because when we say it, we mean it every time. There is no show without you guys. So we're all doing this together. And I think that what we're doing has made a giant impact. And you could say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't win the 2020 elections, meaning Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement overall. And you guys haven't moved the spectrum to the left enough for a single bill to pass. And that's fair. But we have moved 2 generations. And I don't see anybody else moving any generations except Fox News. Fox News has moved the entire senior citizen generation, not all of them, of course, but unfortunately far too high a percentage into insane right-wing category. The establishment has kept everyone else bottled up in cheerleading for the establishment. And I think we've moved millennials and Gen Z along with 1,000 other things, but I think we've been a good part of it. And that's going to make all the difference in the world in the future. And the future could be as early as 4 years from now. It's already happening. Look at all the Justice Democrats who won. Why did they win?
Yeah.
Their number one voting base is young people. So I'm not just doing it out of blind optimism. It's in the polls. It's in the wins. It's in all these things that you can see with your own eyes. 10 years from now, they're going to be crying over, well, it's too late. All the young are already progressive. There's nothing we can do. Goddamn right. It is going to be too late for them. So it's so frustrating to live in the current world still ruled by the mainstream media that manufactures consent rather than doing news. But with it's obviously we're not the major factor in it, right? But I think there's good evidence that we're a significant minor factor in this phenomenon. The major factor is the internet. and they're not going to be able to contain the truth from coming out on the internet. They just can't do it. And so everybody you see on TV now, I don't mean just the pundits, I mean the old politicians too. They're for the trash bin of history. They are, and I don't at all pause in saying that. I delight in saying that.
Man, I really do miss our freestyle post games because I have like a billion things to say. But we do have stories to get to. So let's do it. Let's talk about election interference. So Virginia has begun early voting, early in-person voting specifically. And over the weekend, we got a little taste of what's to come when it comes to Trump supporters and how they're going to try to intimidate voters at in-person voting locations. So as hundreds of voters lined up in Virginia, Trump protesters attempted to block people from entering voting stations. So we have a video kind of showing what the scene looked like. Let's take a quick look at that. So this took place in Virginia's Fairfax County over the weekend, and there were voters who spoke to the press who said that they felt intimidated. By the way, I mean, these protesters have no idea how anyone is planning on voting, but it doesn't matter. They want to prevent people from participating in the election, which is election interference. That's a serious crime. But I don't see any Democrats making a big deal about this. I don't hear them talking about the criminality of doing something like this. And it's really frustrating to see how emboldened these people feel in basically preventing people from participating in our democratic process. Now, a Fairfax County official said that another entrance to the building had to be opened up so voters who were waiting could go in and vote. Gary Scott, who's the Fairfax County General Registrar, said citizens coming into and leaving the building did have to go by them. Those voters who were in line outside the building were moved inside, and we continued operations. Some voters and election staff did feel intimidated by the crowd, and we did provide escorts past the group. One of the escorts was the county executive. Also, the New York Times reported on the incident only to be mocked by the Virginia County GOP, which, of course, on Twitter said, quick, someone call the wambulance, which further proves how little these Republican officials care about protecting our democracy and our democratic process. And of course, the county GOP thinks there was no reason to feel intimidated with these large crowds screaming at voters who were trying to cast their ballots. Sean Rastetter said the following: I don't think there was any way to need or feel intimidated in any form. But look, guys, take a step back and think about some of the rhetoric coming from Donald Trump. Just recently during a rally in Minneapolis, Trump was bragging about how cops had shot, a rubber bullet at a journalist, specifically Ali Velshi from MSNBC, who was on the ground covering the George Floyd protests back in May. Trump was gloating about that. He was happy about the violence toward reporters. So anyone who's been paying attention to the news and paying attention to Donald Trump's rhetoric knows that he constantly gives his base a green light in carrying out acts of violence. He also defended Kyle Rittenhouse, who broke the law by crossing state lines twice with an illegal gun. Then he proceeded to shoot and kill 2 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Trump defended that. And I think that those kinds of messages and that kind of rhetoric does make people feel intimidated. So this is terrible. And this is just a taste of what's to come, Cenk.
Yeah. So let's be clear about a couple of things. There's a certain distance that you have to maintain from a voting area, and you cannot cross that line. And so if they were close to the voting area outside and they were past that line, there definitely should be action taken, especially if they're going to get together in a big way like that and kind of chant and etc. Right? If they're past the line, I'm thick-skinned. I don't care at all. I know everybody's different, but like, oh, 4 more years. That's like your problem, man. I don't. Who cares? So now, but not everybody thinks like I do, and so
exactly,
especially given the violence that the right wing has done throughout these last 4 years, and the things that Anna mentioned, the tip of the iceberg, right? I mean, the Charlottesville rally, and we can go on and on. I can see why some people would not be as thick-skinned as I am, and plus, it's a different situation. I'm a big burly guy, and so I'm not worried about any fight with MAGA guys or anything like that. But other people might feel intimidated. Now, by the way, you know me, I always fight fire with fire. I would say, okay, if you're going to do that, we should do that. So what we should do is, and this is really simple, and you would think if you're a normal, decent person, you'd be like, Cenk, why would that make any difference? Just take working class Latinos and any African Americans. They could be dressed in a 3-piece suit, it doesn't matter, and put them within the legal, limits outside of the line where they can stand, right? So you're not violating any laws, and just have them show up to all the voting areas that are predominantly Republican. Now, you and I would think, oh, cool, so what, right? But Republicans are so scared to death of minorities. I don't know, maybe put a couple LGBTQ folks near voting stations. They might turn around and go home. I mean, because we could use their irrational fear against them. If you're afraid of a black guy in a suit, great, then don't show up to vote. And by the way, do Democrats look to protect the line of where you can stand and not? I'm sure that there's a couple of instances, but barely, if ever, right? Mm-hmm. When in my election, I was standing outside a voting area, which is what every person who's running who cares does on election day, and you follow the legal limits, et cetera, right? And I was doing that meticulously. Nonetheless, I had at least 3 Republican men come yell at the top of their lungs at me, "You're not allowed anywhere near voting stations!" Like, you're wrong. You can go ask the person inside, etc. No, when the Democrats do it, Republicans lose their minds. Just go hold up any political sign, again, in the legally allowed area outside of a voting station, and you will have Republicans try to commit violence against you. So that's the difference between the two parties.
I should also note that just today, Governor Ron DeSantis proposes new legislation that increases penalties for crimes committed during protests. So he's, of course, the Republican governor of Florida. And we all know what kinds of protests he's specifically referring to, Black Lives Matter protests, things like that. But I would venture to say that when it comes to pro-Trump protesters interfering with voters who show up in person to cast their ballots, no penalties for them, right? I mean, I'm just guessing here, but I think it's understandable why I would guess that way. Finally, I should note that Fairfax County, where this situation took place with the Trump voters and Trump supporters, actually did overwhelmingly vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. 2/3 of voters there cast their ballots in favor of Hillary Clinton, which is what motivated those Trump supporters to show up and block people from entering to vote.
I'm telling you, all you need is 2 or 3 black folks per voting station will suppress the Republican vote by 10 points. 10% of Republicans will see black folks outside, perfectly legal, law-abiding, patriotic Americans, and they'll look at them and go, "Oh, black folks," and they'll turn around. Now, Democrats will never do that, but if you can, by the way, if black, Latino, Muslim, gay, go out and stand in front of a voting station, you'll deter Republicans by your mere presence. That's how afraid of you they are.
All right, we got to move on. Let's talk about how Trump does promote violence. He just did it recently in Minnesota. MSNBC anchor Ali Velshi was hit with a rubber bullet during the George Floyd protests last May. He was on the ground reporting live when there was a standoff between cops and protesters. And when he was reporting on it, there was absolutely no provocation coming from the protesters. He kept noting just how aggressive the cops were. And then before you know it, you see him get hit with a rubber bullet. Now, Trump decided to talk about that during a recent rally in Minnesota. Let's hear what he had to say.
I remember this guy, Welchie, he got hit on the knee with a canister of tear gas, and he went down. He didn't, he was down. My knee. Nobody cared. These guys didn't care. They moved him aside. And they just walked right through. It was the most beautiful thing.
It was the most beautiful thing. Violence against a reporter who's doing his job in reporting what's happening on the ground. Velshi did respond to Trump saying, so Donald Trump, you call my getting hit by authorities in Minneapolis on May 30th by a rubber bullet, by the way, not a tear gas canister, a beautiful thing called law and order. What law did I break while covering an entirely peaceful march? But it doesn't matter. I mean, like part of the problem is that with Trump support, like Trump supporters don't care about facts. They don't care about the evidence. They don't care that Donald Trump is lying to them or that he gets the facts wrong when he's doing these rallies. What they love is the feel, right? What they love is Trump pits them against their perceived enemies. And they think, oh, Trump's fighting for us. And these journalists are the problem. The people who are threatening, but risking their own safety in giving us the facts on what's happening on the ground. They're the enemies. Donald Trump is our savior. And just to remind you all of what that scene looked like, here's the portion of Velshi's reporting back in May, where he did get hit by that rubber bullet. And as you can see, it did not go down the way that Trump mentioned.
You are now hearing sirens. There are people moving in. I'm not sure what that is. That's an ambulance that's going by. But that is the situation now. I will tell you, I'm going to ask Miguel to just take a quick spin around. Take a quick look at this, Miguel. We got protesters now moving closer in. The police continue to fire.
Ali, it sounds like they're chanting, do it, like they're daring the state troopers to fire on them again. Is that, am I?
All right, guys, I got hit. Yeah, I got hit. Hold on.
Let's come back out for just a minute. Ali Velshi is standing by on the scene with us.
I mean, just notice how far away he is from the state troopers. Like, he's far away. He's just reporting on what's going on. If you watch the full video, the state troopers had used tear gas canisters against the protesters who were protesting. They were very far away from the state troopers. They didn't pose any type of imminent threat or risk to them, but it doesn't matter. We've seen in city after city, case after case, very similar treatment toward protesters who weren't doing anything other than practicing their constitutionally protected rights.
Yeah. Look, I think mainstream media is an enormous problem. They clearly favor what they consider to be the centrist position. In fact, they find it outrageous that you would hire anyone that isn't centrist. And now that's, of course, the center of Washington, not of the country. So that makes most of the mainstream media very right-wing, especially on economic matters, and dead set against progressives. And they have just obliterated progressive candidates, and often with lies and out of context stories. It's just been an abomination. But the difference between us and the left wing and those guys in the right wing is we actually love journalism. We want there to be great journalism. We want there to be bold, strong journalism that challenges people in power, that challenges the government, that challenges both political parties, the way journalism is supposed to be. You don't have to get to our opinion on things. That we have plenty of opinion. We don't need your opinion. But we do need you to be objective, not neutral to both sides. We do need you to actually be factually correct, not politically correct, and say, oh, I don't want to offend Republicans. I don't want to offend corporate Democrats. And we need you to open your eyes so that you can actually see what the whole country is thinking instead of what everyone in your country club is thinking. So now all those things are big problems with the mainstream media, but they're not to tear it down. The right wing wants to tear it down so that he could replace it with propaganda. He could replace it with Fox News and Rush Limbaugh, etc. No, science isn't real. What did Trump say the other day? Actually, science doesn't know, actually, he said. Because 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. We want you to think that it equals 5. And the minute we get you to believe that it equals 5, we've won. Then you'll believe anything. Then I can shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and get away with it. So that's the right-wing purpose. And so now they've taken it to a different level. That's shooting a reporter. Now, it's with a rubber bullet. So at the end of the day, he wound up being okay. By the way, you take a rubber bullet to the eye and you will not be okay. And people have died before. But at a minimum, you should be deeply concerned. If a right-wing pundit got shot with a rubber bullet, I would say that's wrong. And that's not hard. That's not remotely hard. I would say it's wrong if the cops did it. I would say it's wrong if protesters did it, etc. But here's Trump, the president of the United States, joking around. Yeah, we did. Remember when the reporter got shot? Oh, and then he was crying about being shot, and the crowd's going nuts. Yeah, shoot the reporters. Yeah. Okay, so and by the way, and how do reporters respond? So they responded with outrage on Twitter about this. Another reporter from NBC said, "I've covered a lot of dictatorial governments, and even their leaders pretend to care about the press and never openly say that it was a good thing that a reporter got shot. The worst dictators don't say that." So, okay, good on this front, right? At least from about a dozen of them or so that I happen to see. But overall, as soon as the story's over, they'll go back to calling it even. And they'll forget that the Republican crowd just cheered the shooting of reporters. And when the next issue of violence comes up, they'll say, oh, both sides do it. Both sides do it. And they won't tell you, no, Republicans do it literally hundreds of times more. The Republicans cheer the violence. They'll just go back to, he said, she said, what am I, a reporter? I can't tell. So
Cenk,
there we are.
You're going to love this. I don't know if you saw this yet because he tweeted it at 8:30 a.m. Chris Matthews tweeted the following, and it's been ratioed. Trump is right to show respect for RBG. True presidential behavior, far too rare. So what he's referring to is how Donald Trump is going to wait until after the funeral services for RBG in order to announce his Supreme Court pick.
No, I just look.
True presidential behavior.
Now, with guys like Chris Matthews, I really don't know. Nah, they're just not that bright. They've been in this environment for the last 40 years, and they still think it's 1973. Nobody has to tell Chris Matthews to say silly things. He says them naturally. That's why they picked him in the first place. That's why they kept him on TV for like 30 straight years. Because when the Republicans need him, here is a so-called, Chris Matthews doesn't hide that he's a Democrat. So-called Democratic pundit coming out and going, oh my God, can you believe that? He's being so presidential. Finally, after 3 3/4 years, this is the moment when Trump became president. And by the way, so why do I say stupid instead of just wrong? You don't know that he's waiting to see what the Federalist Society is going to say, what the different Republican senators and congressmen are going to say, what his pollsters are going to say about how much picking one of the judges is going to help him in Florida versus how much picking the other judge is going to help him with evangelical voters, and that he's waiting for the polling to come in and for everybody to weigh in on the Republican side. And you really think he's doing it out of respect for RBG's funeral? How can anybody be that naive? And that's Chris Matthews, and that's television pundits in a nutshell.
All right, now the story that I've been dying to talk about. It's a little dry, but please bear with me because it's important. So, a massive investigative report by BuzzFeed News finds that the largest banks in the United States have been willingly and knowingly been laundering money for international crime rings. And the way that they handle this is by just continuing to do business with them, knowing full well that the Treasury Department is not going to hold them accountable and they won't have to face any consequences. If you don't believe me, you should absolutely read the full report because it's incredible. It gives you far more detail than we can give you in this particular video. But I'm going to do my best to give you the highlights because this is happening right now as crazy QAnon conspiracy theorists think that there's a child sex trafficking ring that's being run by all sorts of political people they dislike, when in reality, our largest financial institutions are laundering money for actual child sex trafficking rings, and they're getting away with it. So profits from deadly drug wars, fortunes embezzled from developing countries, and hard-earned savings stolen in a Ponzi scheme were all allowed to flow into and out of these financial institutions despite warnings from the bank's own employees. In fact, a former investigator with Wachovia Bank, his name is Martin Woods, told BuzzFeed News, quote, "Some of these people in those crisp white shirts and their sharp suits are feeding off the tragedy of people dying all over the world." And it's not as though the Treasury Department has been kept in the dark about this. They know about some of these criminal transactions, and they decided to do nothing about it. So as BuzzFeed News writes, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, is the agency within the Treasury Department charged with combating money laundering, terrorist financing, and other financial crimes. It collects millions of suspicious activity reports, known as SARs. It makes them available to U.S. law enforcement agencies and other nations' financial intelligence operations. It even compiles a report called Kleptocracy Weekly that summarizes the dealings of foreign leaders. So they know, they're like, hey, let's put together a fun news alert about it, little, newsletter about it. It's insane. Okay. So let's talk about the process in which banks need to file these reports, and then we'll give you some specifics on what BuzzFeed News was able to find by poring over these documents. So FinCEN files flagged more than $2 trillion in transactions between 1999 and 2017. Western banks could have blocked almost any of them, but in most cases, they kept the money moving and kept collecting their fees. In some cases, banks filed numerous reports on the same clients detailing their suspected crimes over the course of years while continuing to welcome their business. So basically, as long as the banks file those reports, the SARS reports, right? They're basically at that point immune from being held accountable for continuing to do business with these, illegal groups, with these criminal groups, because at that point, it's up to the Treasury Department to really fully investigate the claims and to hold those individuals accountable. But the Treasury Department has always been pretty hands-off, and it's been worse under the Trump administration, where Rod Rosenstein essentially said, let's not pile on. Let's not pile on to these banks. Okay, let's just leave it alone. And yeah, they've been leaving it alone. So let me give you some more. Actually, Cenk, I'm sorry, I'm like rambling on because the story excites me. But why don't you jump in?
Yeah. So first, this is bipartisan. Eric Holder, Obama's Attorney General, literally testified in Congress that the bankers are too big to jail. And he said, well, if we do that, that could hurt the global economy, and we don't want to do that. Well, that means as Attorney General, you just gave them a get out of jail free card. You could break any law, and we've decided you're too big to jail. So have at it, Hoss. And you didn't think they were going to break the law? Of course. So now a lot of things the Republicans do worse, but in terms of letting the bankers rob us, Democrats are just as good as Republicans on that issue. So look, guys, once the Supreme Court in the late 1970s said that corporations can give money to politicians, they actually made a great number of illegal sectors of the economy legal. So loan sharks became payday lenders, and then they just contribute to politicians and they could charge whatever interest rate they want. And they got rid of the old laws on loan sharking, and they put on suits. And they go, oh, that's an official guy, and he gave a politician money. They're now respectable. Drug dealers became Big Pharma. So Big Pharma said, oh, I got a great idea. Why don't we put heroin inside OxyContin? And it'll look official like any other pill, and we'll have suits on. So when So the drug dealers became legal, and they just bribed the politicians, and the politicians let them deal drugs all across the country, get people addicted, and about tens of thousands, I think it's 40,000, sometimes more, people a year die from just that, from drug dealers that are perfectly legal. And now for the bankers, they made money laundering legal. Yeah. Oh, you want to do it for terrorists who murder Americans? Who cares? That's $2 trillion. That's a lot of money we're going to money launder, and we're going to make a ton of money off that. You want to do it for other illicit activities and dictators? Who cares? Who cares? Are we making money or not? So the money launderers then put on suits and gave money to politicians, and we've completely lost our government ever since then. And look, guys, we're doing defund the police on the left, and the right wing is losing their minds, right? Oh my God, you can't defund the police. But what did they do? They took the cops off the street on Wall Street. So whether it was the SEC or any other governmental body that could regulate Wall Street, they defunded them, including, by the way, the IRS. So that said to everybody, cheat on your taxes, cheat in the banks, cheat anywhere you want as long as you're rich. We've defunded the police for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when it comes to the IRS, they've been defunded to the point where they don't focus on auditing high-level tax frauds, wealthy people who might be claiming fake deductions and all sorts of nonsense in order to avoid paying taxes. They focus all their energies on people who barely make enough money to get by. So these policies obviously do hurt Americans in, not raising enough revenue to fund programs that we desperately need. But then there's also the added bonus of people living in poverty who get hit with these audits while people who are incredibly wealthy get left alone. So let me give you some specific examples that were outlined by BuzzFeed. And look, we're in the Trump era, so a story like this is the kind of reporting that I love. I want to see more of this stuff. And I give the team that worked on this story a lot of credit because this is not an easy thing to report on. And I just hate that something like this is just going to get lost in the shuffle. But if you can, please spread this story, share this story. And when it comes to the financial institutions that we're referring to in the context of this story, if you're banking with them, get your money out. Get your money out. They're laundering money for the worst people in the world, knowingly. Get your money out, put it in a financial institution that actually has morals and ethics. Aspiration is one of our partners, and it's because we believe in them and we believe in what they're doing. They don't invest money in the fossil fuel industries. And I haven't seen any negative news stories about Aspiration doing any of this garbage stuff that we're hearing from some of these big banks. So with that said, and by the way, go to aspiration.com/TYT to learn more about that financial institution. So let's talk about the specific examples. By December of 2013, JP Morgan Chase had filed at least 8 SARs on accounts and companies controlled by Manafort, flagging more than $10 million according to a FinCEN research report. We all know what happened to Manafort later. He went on to become Trump's campaign chair and was convicted of bank and tax fraud in 2018. This is my favorite example. So this was a big story that you covered in great detail, Cenk, in 2012, after permitting narco traffickers to launder money and contributing business in off-limits countries such as Sudan and Myanmar. HSBC was fined $1.9 billion. FinCEN Files investigation shows HSBC continued banking and profiting from the same kinds of customers that got them in trouble in the first place, such as a Panamanian import-export firm that the Treasury Department later said was laundering money for drug kingpins. Like, it's people with possession of marijuana are still serving insanely long prison sentences in the United States, while this bank is laundering money for narco traffickers. Like, just let that sink in for a second.
Okay, so first of all, the story link is in the description box. You should always check out the description box on YouTube and Facebook so you can get more information. But I'll give you more information now. Dick Cheney's Halliburton had a subsidiary that had brazenly violated the sanctions against Iran all the way back when Cheney and Bush were elected. And Cheney would go out and say, it's an outrage if anybody violates the sanctions, full well knowing he was the CEO of the company that was violating sanctions on that same exact country. They think the rules don't apply to them. If they make money off it, who cares? But God help you if you did it. If you money laundered for a terrorist organization, do you know what you'd get? Pretty much a life sentence. Unless you're a banker, in which case you'd get nothing. You'd get a bonus, to be honest. And that's literal. So if they paid a $1.9 billion fine, which they did, and they went back to doing the same exact thing the next day, that means they made at least $2 billion off of what they were doing. So the $1.9 billion fine was just a cost of doing business. And when Eric Holder said, we will never jail any bankers, that was a green light to break any law you like. Don't worry, it's just the cost of doing business. And when we fine you, we have an understanding. We'll obviously fine you less than your margin. So you can still make a profit, at least enough of a profit to donate back to Barack Obama and Donald Trump and George W. Bush. And that's how this game is played.
Yeah, it's crazy. I got to give you one more example, but there are more in the report. Again, this has to do with JP Morgan Chase. As BuzzFeed reports, for years, JP Morgan Chase was the primary bank of the world's biggest Ponzi schemer, Bernie Madoff. Despite multiple warnings from its own employees, the bank never filed a suspicious activity report on him and allegedly collected $500 million in fees. Because again, guys, this is about their bottom line. They don't care if you're a criminal or not. If they can collect fees from you, especially to the tune of $500 million, they're gonna do it. For punishment, the bank was required to pay a $1.7 billion fine and promised to improve its money laundering defenses. But after it settled the Madoff case, the bank's own investigators said they suspected it had opened its accounts to an alleged Russian organized crime figure who is known for drug trafficking and contract murders. Sounds pretty serious, as well as businesses tied to the repressive North Korean regime, which the United States has placed off limits. They just kept doing it, guys. They kept doing it, and they did it even worse. And it doesn't even matter because the president's a criminal. Steve Mnuchin, who is the head of the Treasury, is a criminal. He had to face consequences when his bank, One West, committed fraud in order to wrongfully foreclose on people's homes after the financial collapse. These people are criminals. So how are you going to expect criminals to hold criminals accountable?
Well,
they do criminal stuff together. They love it.
So we're the last show on earth to do false equivalency. So on almost every other issue, we'll tell you why the Republicans are worse than the Democrats. If that's the case, there's one or two issues that Democrats are worse than the Republicans on. In this case, it is completely bipartisan. You want to know who let off Steve Mnuchin when he broke the law in California? Kamala Harris, now running for VP on the Democratic ticket. And by the way, did she get a campaign donation for that? In a wild coincidence, she did. And if you go to New York, by the way, Cyrus Vance, Democratic district prosecutor there in Manhattan, nonstop political contributions. And then guys like Harvey Weinstein walked after he got a contribution, or he would set them free and then he'd get a giant contribution afterwards. And he did that for some of the Trump figures as well. So this is how things go around. As long as you allow bribery, you will also, by definition, allow money laundering, loan sharking, drug dealing, all sorts of criminality, because they just pay the refs off at the end. And along those lines, just two more quick explanations. Guys, when you see a $500 million that they made off of Bernie Madoff, understand that executives got paid bonuses based on how much money they made in those years. If the bank gets caught later and has to pay a fine, who cares? They already got their bonus. If they got their bonus in 97 and the bank gets caught in 2003, they're probably at a different place already. No one cares. The only way you'll ever get them to care is if you say, If you break the law while you're at a bank, you are going to go to prison. Then you will get their attention. Until then, the highway robbery will continue unabated. And finally, you're saying, well, there is one guy you mentioned there that worked in finance that actually did get busted and is still in prison. That's Bernie Madoff. So does that mean somebody's doing something? No. Bernie Madoff made a terrible mistake. If you rip off the poor or the middle class, you could do it till the cows come home. Bernie Madoff stole from the rich. So that's the one thing you cannot get away with in America.
Yep. All right.
Okay.
TYT Sports is next on Twitch. You should check out our Twitch channel because it's fire. All right. It's twitch.tv/TYT. That is what the URL is. And that is the first time I didn't screw it up.
All right. Nice job. All right. One last thing, guys. That wolf-pack.com/jank that I mentioned earlier in the show, it's actually pretty cool on a couple of fronts. So sure, we're going to do the 5K for the workshop and do the 5K with me. Even if you don't give any money, it's totally okay. We'll keep our steps, count our steps together. But I want to go past that. I want to keep it going and have like a page where you guys can see how much I'm exercising. I know that's dangerous for me, but it'll help motivate me. So in fact, I forgot to put in my steps for yesterday. So after the show, I'm going to put that in. And you can see my steps too at wolf-pack.com/jank. Okay. So and be part of Team Jank. Let's meet our goals. It'll keep us healthier and it will keep democracy healthier. Oh, how's that for a win-win? All right, guys. Much love. Go check out Ricky on Twitch. We'll see you guys soon.